Good evening, one and all. On behalf of Council, I recognise the traditional custodians of the land and pay tribute to elders past, present and emerging. As councillors of Ku-ring-gai Council, we should always be aware that the decisions we make affect the daily lives of those we represent. Let us all make these decisions with knowledge, goodwill and respecting the views of others. Before we start tonight's meeting, I would like to outline a few points in regarding to this evening's proceedings. Tonight's meeting will be live streamed on the Council's website at www.krg.nsw.gov.au/live stream. Only councillors and council staff will be shown on camera. The webcast of the meeting is available on Council's website. The webcast will commence once the Mayor is seated and will cease if Council goes into confidential, where the public and press are excluded, pursuant to Section 10A of the Local Government Act. Council meetings remain open to the public as observers, but in line with the Code of Meeting Practice, speakers will now address the Council through the monthly public forums and not at Council meetings. For more information about addressing Council, please visit our website at www.krg.nsw.gov.au. All present tonight must refrain from engaging in disorderly conduct, publicly alleging breaches of the Council's Code of Conduct, or making other potentially defamatory statements. Councillors and Council staff must declare and manage any conflicts of interest they may have in relation to any item of business that is subject of the meeting agenda this evening. Apologies, we have all councillors here this evening. General Manager?
There are none from the staff, Mr Mayor.
Declarations of interest. Councillors, are there any declarations of interest? There being none, General Manager, any staff declarations?
There are none, Mr Mayor.
General Manager, documents circulated to councillors.
I'll do confidential first.
Oh, we got out of kilter. And confirmation of reports to be considered in closed meeting. General Manager?
Mr Mayor and councillors, no reports, but in relation to GB6, which is the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, selection of external independent member, attachments 1 and 2.
Nice and short this evening. Documents circulated to councillors.
Get a vote on that.
And we also need to vote on those reports remaining confidential. I seek a mover of that. Move Councillor Spencer, second Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Documents circulated to councillors.
Mr Mayor and councillors, there is a late agenda which contains GB14, Tender Nesrock RFT 20-2021, road surfacing, patching and associated works, and GB15, 4 Pennant Avenue Gordon risk assessment. And there is late councillors' information which has 2 items: a letter from Coral Ross AM, Chair of the Australian Gender Equity Council, supporting NM3, and a response from Director Banasif in relation to question with notice 1, financial issues for Norman Griffith's synthetic development.
Excellent. Councillors, confirmation of minutes of the last meeting. Moved Councillor Smith, seconded Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous. We move to minutes from the Mayor, and there is one this evening, councillors. And this is Vale Judith Shaddock, former Ku-ring-gai councillor. It is my sad duty to inform my councillor colleagues and the Ku-ring-gai community of the death of a much respected community advocate and former Ku-ring-gai councillor, Judith Shaddock. Judith Shaddock was born in Coonamble in 1934 and settled into Park Avenue, Roseville in 1968 with her husband John and their 3 young children. She was a Roseville resident for 54 years until her death on the 17th of July 2022. Judith, or Judy as she liked to be known, first became involved in the community through the Roseville Chase Kindergarten and Roseville Public School, which her children attended. Her interest in community affairs was sparked by her desire to protect Ku-ring-gai's natural environment, She joined the Roseville Progress Association and Ku-ring-gai Ratepayers Association with the aim of seeing development tightly controlled by local planning laws, and as a result, the area protected from high density development. Judith ran for council in the elections of 1984 at a time when very few women were represented on local councils. In fact, at that time, female councillors were still referred to as aldermen. According to her daughter, Judith was selfless and passionate in representing her constituents. She felt she spent endless hours on the phone and visiting homes, particularly the elderly, to address their concerns. Serving on Ku-ring-gai Council between 1984 and 1987, Judith became the leader in coordinating the community celebrations of Australia's bicentenary in 1988. She was appointed chair of the Ku-ring-gai Bicentennial Committee and oversaw the local event planning. She was also one of the driving forces behind the improvements to Bicentennial Park in West Pymble, which included the amphitheatre and the elevated boardwalk. During her term, Judith served as Governor of the Errol Trust and represented Council on the Maritime Foreshore Committee and New South Wales Home Care Services. Judith Shaddock will be remembered as a tireless and compassionate community volunteer and someone who was ahead of her time in her service to Council. On behalf of our community, I extend my sincere condolences to Judith's family on their loss. I move that the mayoral minute be received and noted, that we stand for a minute's silence to honour Judith Shaddock, that the mayor write to Judith's family and encloses a copy of the mayoral minute. Councillors, would anybody wish to speak to this mayoral minute before we vote? As mayor, it is important that we respect those that have come before us and put their hand up for public service. It is a difficult job to do and at times thankless. But no doubt Judy made a difference to people's lives with what she did. To being that voice on the end of a telephone that can offer reassurance or just a friendly ear is important, and I think we can follow in those footsteps as councillors. People do look to a councillor as a leader of the community. It is a privilege. I'm sure Judy enjoyed it immensely. So all those in favour? That is unanimous. We'll stand for a moment. Thank you everybody for that. Councillors, petitions. Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, I actually have a petition that I would like to forward to Chris. I've actually got it on an email with it's in relation to NM6, proposed park bench installation. I have 108 it was electronic signatures, if you like, that are in support for the bench to be supported in St Ives. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And we need a seconder for that petition. Seconded, Councillor Wheatley, that the petition be referred to the appropriate officer to be dealt with. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Councillors, any other petitions? Councillors, I invite any councillor to nominate any item on the agenda that they wish to have a site inspection. No site inspections. I invite councillors to nominate any item on the agenda that they wish to adopt in accordance with the officer's recommendation, allowing for minor changes without debate. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall skip GB1 as Councillor Kay wished to speak to that. I shall start from GB2, Officer's recommendation.
Moved Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Alec Taylor. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB3, Officer's recommendation.
Seconded Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB4, Officer's recommendation.
Seconded Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB5, Officer's recommendation.
Moved Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Wheatley. Thank you. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB6, Officer's recommendation.
Moved Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB7, Officer's recommendation.
Seconded Councillor Smith. All those in favour? That's unanimous.
GB8, Officer's recommendation.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, could we change the wording to dinner instead of lunch?
I think that is a bit of a typographical error there, where it actually is a dinner.
I'm sorry, can we clarify?
That's on GB7. I'm sure that's
Could the officer note?
yes.
And that's affirmative.
That's okay.
And we've done GB8.
GB8 was seconded by Councillor Alec Taylor. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
I shall skip GB9.
Thank you.
GB10, Officer's recommendation.
Seconded Councillor Wheatley. All those in favour? That is unanimous.
GB11, Officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded Councillor Ward. All those in favour? That's unanimous.
GB12, Officer's recommendation.
Seconded Councillor Kay with some enthusiasm there. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you.
GB13, Officer's recommendation.
Moved Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Kay. All those in favour? That's unanimous.
GB14, Officer's recommendation.
GB14 is one of the late agenda items
It's on the attachment.
in the attachments, which is the tender. So seconded Councillor Alec Taylor. All those in favour? That's unanimous.
GB15, Officer's recommendation.
Moved Councillor Spencer, seconded Councillor Wheatley.
Withdraw that one.
Withdrawn by Councillor Lennon.
And I think that sums it. Except for those few, 3 of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's no confidential item to be moved as well.
No, there isn't. That's
No,
it this
there
evening,
isn't.
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you.
Excellent. So we go back to GB1. It was withdrawn.
I move NM7 as well, without debate.
Councillor Nye is moving NM7 as printed.
Withdrawn.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move NM5 as printed. Thanks.
You can't actually move NM5 because you were not the author of it, unfortunately.
I beg your pardon.
Councillor Wheatley,
I'd like to move NM5.
as printed with any minor modifications
Yeah, there's a minor modification, which,
staff have up on the screen.
yep. It's to include the words at the end, include the viability of the project.
And that's been seconded by Councillor Spencer.
Thank you.
That's right. So all those in favour of NM5? That is unanimous. So now we roll back to GB1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just, I beg your pardon, I would also like to move NM3 as the author of that motion.
That is the gender target. Well, people are getting to that.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move an amendment.
At this point in time, you just have to withdraw.
Okay.
So that's withdrawn by Councillor Ward.
Withdraw.
One last call, otherwise we will go back to GB1. Councillor Kay.
Okay, so GB1, I'll just bring it up, is the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference. So I have a proposed motion. I just wanted to give a bit of background in relation to GB1 because it actually wasn't presented in the papers. So this actually has come about from a motion I had last year, which was by myself, Councillor Kay and Councillor Kelly, dated the 29th of October, and it was about the Employee Assistance Program. So basically, the EAP is an employee assistance program that supports employees with work-related problems as well as personal problems that may impact on their job performance, health and mental well-being. EAP offers employer-funded confidential counselling for employees and their families, as well as consultative support for managers and supervisors to address employees and organisational challenges and needs. Now, this previously was available at our council only for council staff and wasn't available for councillors. After an unfortunate serious matter that I had last year, it became evident that this wasn't available. Now, I know some of us work in other
Councillor
workplaces.
Kay,
Sorry.
did we miss something?
Sorry.
I.e. a seconder
Oh, sorry.
before you launched into your
Okay.
soliloquy? Seconded Councillor Alec Taylor. You might wish to restart, unless you want to sort of skip through to where you're at the moment.
I'll just carry on. That's fine. I'm sure everyone's fine. Sorry, I'm not feeling great, so if I miss some rules. Okay. So basically, I had a matter that came to me. It's not easy being a counsellor, and it's at times very challenging, from other counsellors to dealing with residents that may be passionate about something. So I felt it was really important that counsellors also had this service available to them. Now, I do want to commend Director Marshall for helping me put this together, and at the time said, we were under the assumption that council staff, like councillors, had this available to them, but it turned out it wasn't. Now, some of us work in office environments, and I know myself, I do, where some of these assistance programs are available. I do believe that councillors should have that. And this is not just to deal with council issues. It could be a personal matter of a loved one passing away, but I really do think it's important. So I thought that this was an opportunity to bring this to the Local Government New South Wales Conference, so every council and every councillor has the opportunity to have some free services available to them to have discussions with a party and address mental health, or just even having a discussion in general that can help them with their day-to-day lives. Hopefully all you councillors will support it, so thank you.
Councillor Taylor has seconded. Do you wish to speak?
All right, thank you.
That's quite all right. I'm not seeing any other lights on it, so all those in favour of Councillor Kay's motion, which is GB1, thank you. That it's unanimous. GB9. We move to GB9, which was withdrawn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last meeting I moved a motion, which is currently with staff. I would like to move essentially the same motion again to amend what is currently in the papers, but without the final paragraph. I think Councillor Spencer's notice of motion later this evening makes the last paragraph superfluous. So we're looking at the item as per the minutes, by which we referred to inviting Council to note certain passages out of the Independent Chairman's report, and then inviting Council to take action in response to that. There we go. And we began with, before that, fairly importantly, the motion notes certain extracts from the Independent Chairman's report, which...
Councillor Lennon, we do need a seconder before you start debating that. So unless you need to
So I wasn't debating, I was simply clarifying the terms of the motion. The motion includes noting portions of the Independent Chairman's report as per the minutes of the last meeting.
So you would need to add a point D in there somewhere.
No. If we look at the minutes of the last meeting, we began by noting various passages out of the Independent Chairman's report.
I would suggest that you put point D and then put all that wording.
Well, the wording is really where we begin. The Independent Chairman's report is absolutely central to this motion, and I invite Council to note that in the context of proceedings.
And the best way is putting that as a point D.
Sorry, that point D is what we no longer need. That was in there last month, but we no longer require it, given later agenda items this evening.
So you have a new point D with that.
Well, it was, I thought, adequately expressed in the minutes of the last meeting. The motion as actually presented at the last meeting.
It is already in the public record as well too.
It is, if we go to the minutes, but halfway down page 39, we see that we move the Council to note the report of the Independent Chairman, and in particular these particular passages.
General Manager.
Mr Mayor, through you to Councillor Lennon, I agree, Councillor Lennon, on the basis that those minutes have now been adopted and ratified, they are on the public record, so I don't think you need to actually put it into this motion again. It's already been resolved by Council that that report has been noted and ratified in the minutes tonight. So,
that motion wasn't actually adopted at the last meeting.
No,
the last meeting we adjourned.
The minutes from the last meeting have been adopted tonight.
Yes, but those minutes simply refer to this text being moved that we noted. We didn't actually note it. That resolution was never passed. In fact, it was never considered.
Mm-hmm.
I understood that because we are now picking up the last meeting at the point of adjournment, then the amending motion that I moved at the last meeting should be picked up word for word, aside from that last paragraph D, given, as I said, a later agenda item.
Councillor Lennon, the normal procedure for a motion would be to have we move that point A, that council note, etc., etc., etc. Then B, that council does not adopt. C, becomes the staff, etc., etc.
Oh, we can certainly do that, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Yes?
It's a tidier way of doing it.
Oh, by all means,
Yep.
yes. I agree.
Yep. Well, move it to A and just rename the others. That's it. All good. Nice and neat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We should be neat.
That's okay.
That's the motion that I wish to move. Thank you.
And a seconder for that, Councillor Ward. Councillor Lennon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to repeat what we said last month. I think the last thing we want to do is go back through there. Everything that I said last month still holds true. At the 11th hour at the last meeting, Director Watson referred to some confidential information. Thank you for sharing that with councillors. There was a suggestion at the time that that would alter the significance of the independent chairman's report. I've been through the information. I am of the view that it does not alter the independent chairman's report, but of course I'm no expert. I'm not independent when it comes to the matters affecting this municipality. I'm not an expert. I thus asked Director Watson if we could, by some means, have a view of the independent chairman as to whether that affected his report. I think Director Watson was very polite when he called the idea imaginative, but the bottom line from the views of our council lawyer as well as Director Watson is that's not possible. We simply do not know what impact the confidential information would have had upon the independent chairman's report. So we're thus in an imperfect situation. And life is full of imperfect situations. You make judgments nevertheless. It is my view that we are best served by going with what we have, the independent chairman's report, and its recommendations that this council reconsider the rezoning of the former Gordon Bowling Club site. If indeed this motion is passed, then I invite all councillors and staff to get on board with what I think can be a fairly interesting, if modest, project in Gordon and Clara of servicing the people of that part of this municipality. It could be a very good idea that everybody can really feel very proud of at the end of the day. And the last thing I'd like to say before we consider the motion is that this will be the last roll of the dice. I know there will be further motions about the Gordon Bowling Club site in the future, if indeed we do proceed with the rezoning. But in the absence of new information in the future, let's face it, this is it. If we're going to preserve this important part of public recreational land and a part of the municipality that we have identified as needing public recreational land, this is the night to do it. This is the night to put an end to the rezoning process and to put the residents of Gordon and Killara, and indeed the whole of the municipality, all the people of this municipality who make submissions to reports and expect to have their views considered, would expect that this particular report, having decided that it is right for council to reconsider the zoning, should proceed to do so. So this is the night to decide whether this part of the municipality will continue to have public recreational land that the people have enjoyed for the last 4 years, and hope, with council's approval, to continue doing so. Thank you.
Councillors, listen in silence. There is no applause, unfortunately, from the gallery. Second, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I just want to concur with what my fellow councillor here has said. Further to that, I'd like to note that we talk about community land, and we talk about that community land is valued for its important role in the social, intellectual, spiritual and physical enrichment of residents, workers and visitors to Ku-ring-gai Council area. What we're arguing here today is, how can this land be surplus and it can be sold when we clearly, as Ku-ring-gai Council, want to keep our green space, and we want to make sure that our residents get their mental and physical respite into something that is so beautiful. Mr. Mayor, we have been talking about this for a while, and it is time that we do deliver to the residents of Gordon, Ku-ring-gai as a whole, a green space that is so needed. Once it's gone, we can never have it back. I urge all of my fellow councillors to please think carefully before we make a decision that we may regret. Thank you.
Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to apologise if I start coughing during this meeting. I've been sick for the last few days and can't control my coughs. Now, I'd like to start by saying that as a Ku-ring-gai councillor, I take my duties seriously, and it actually doesn't matter which ward is being discussed. As long as it's a matter that's being discussed and it's within Ku-ring-gai Council, it is my concern as well as the concern of all councillors present. Now, specifically here for the Gordon Bowling Club, I know it's not in my ward. I do have some experience with the area because I used to live in Killara. I also used to house sit for a former manager of mine on Browns Road in Gordon, so I know the area well. And to me, what's important for all residents in Ku-ring-gai is that we provide an option for residents to really have some degree of active recreation, that they can kick a ball around, that they can go for a jog, that they can take the dog, that sort of thing, within close proximity to where they live. Now, if it has been noted in the past that we are not selling off potentially the entire Gordon Bowling Club site, that a proportion of the site remains under the current proposal. But if you really look at it, if you visit the site, you look at it and it's basically the dregs. Can you kick a ball there? No, not really. Can you run around? No, not really. Can you take the dog for a bit of a run around there? No, you can't. It's the absolute dregs of okay, I wouldn't call it dregs. There's a lot of trees, which is good in a sense, but you can't use it for a certain form of recreation. And if you really did want to kick a ball or do something like that, then you'd have to check out other options: Ku-ring-gai Park, Gordon Recreation Ground, future hypothetical park that I'm not allowed to talk about, things like that. They're all over 1 kilometre away. So that's why I believe it's important that we do retain the site here at Gordon. I'm actually not opposed to selling off part of the site, but I do believe that at least part of the site should be retained for usable, meaningful, active recreation. And I believe that this motion is one way to go forward with retaining at least part of the site for recreation. Finally, I'd like to say that, look, I agree with a lot of what Councillor Lennon and Councillor Ward has said just in the last 5 minutes. However, I do believe that there has been a bit of a double standard, because at Reswood Chase, it's a similar situation. Yes, on paper, there are parks nearby, but can you really kick a ball, run around, take a dog for a run, that sort of thing at these supposed nearby parks? No, not really. The only meaningful options are all over 1 kilometre away, and I believe that Gordon and Rosehill Chase should have had the same treatment. Thank you, but I would like to encourage councillors to support this particular motion, because it's important to give our residents an opportunity to have active recreation space in a meaningful distance, less than 1 kilometre walk for sure, not some straight line by the crow flies on the other side of the highway. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Councillors Ward and Leonard, I've probably got an additional point E which you might wish to incorporate, and I'll just get council staff to bring that up on the screen. Councillors, are you happy to incorporate that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a surprise. I feel like it's an important concept that we don't actually need to determine tonight. We have motion with its items A to D. This may or may not be true, but I think it needs consideration and should not be a decision made.
If you would like to ask Director Watson of that question, whether it is true or not.
Well, I always welcome Director Watson's views on everything, but I just feel like this depends upon information that we don't have, and while I welcome whatever you can say now, this seems to be an issue of some significance. And as I said, it may well be quite right, but I'm loath to make a decision on the basis of a single answer this evening. But by all means, please, Director Watson, I would welcome your view.
Director?
Mr. Mayor, Part E as drafted is correct. There would no longer be a need for that additional confidential site we had discussed on the west side of Gordon in the event the bowling club was retained.
If that answers your question, if you're happy to incorporate that.
I would still prefer that we consider this over the coming weeks, and perhaps this isn't a suitable item for the agenda next month. I simply am not in a position on my feet to suddenly consider that. As I say, you may all be correct, Director Watson. I don't want to suggest for a moment that you're not. I simply think this is a statement of some significance that we need to think through more carefully than on our feet at this meeting.
I won't put that up as an amendment. Councillors, if there's any more debate on this particular item, I will put Councillor Lennon's motion. All those in favour?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, what are we voting here on the total motion with your additional paragraph?
No.
No.
Okay.
You have foreshadowed an amendment?
No.
No. Nothing. That's it. All those in favour of Councillor Lennon's motion? That is Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Nye. Against? Councillor Spencer, Wheatley, Smith, Pettit. That's carried. We move to GB 15. Councillor Lennon? Councillor Lennon, do we have a motion? You withdrew it.
Excuse
I
me.
forwarded to staff today a suggested amendment to that. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a proposed motion which I gave staff earlier today.
Councillor Lennon, are you moving this, or who's moving it?
I'm moving this motion. Should I read this out at this point?
No, let's just get up on the board, thank you. And seconder?
Can we just read it? It's just 2 points.
Yeah.
And seconder for that? Councillor Kay? Councillor Taylor?
I reserve my right to speak to this motion.
Councillor Kay?
So do I. I just have my right. But I've got a question.
Your question?
This is through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director the NASIF. We've just got a component here that talks about remaining costs and prepared cost estimates for remediation. Do you have any idea approximately, without doing an investigation, what those costs may be?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the cost will a little bit difficult at the moment to estimate. A remediation action plan is required, and the remediation action plan would be in the order of about $40,000 to $50,000.
Thank you.
Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is all just to Mr. Munson. I just wanted to know how much will it cost to put the fence around the whole of the park, and if there is also an ongoing cost associated with that fence.
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the report actually identifies the chain wire fence to close off access from bushlands, as well as from Pennant Avenue, to retain the car park. That would mean that the entire green space is fenced off from the community. A fixed fence would be in order of about $6,000, $6,500, and a temporary fence would be on a monthly cost. So at this stage, depending on the outcome of tonight's meeting, a temporary fence will be installed for at least 2 weeks, and that will be in the order of about $1,500. And then we will remove the temporary fence and put a fixed permanent fence until the site is remediated.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Spencer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put through an amendment, please,
Indeed, far away.
which is the officer's recommendation.
And the seconder for that is seconded Councillor Smith. Councillor Spencer?
Nothing really much to say, except, we appear to be talking about... sorry, they want to put it up.
It's up on the screen now.
Right.
Excellent. Far away, Councillor Spencer.
Thank you. So, in the last few months, including tonight, what I've heard is Ku-ring-gai Council, Gordon Ward, Roseville Ward. Ku-ring-gai Council, Gordon Ward, Roseville. It's more than just Gordon and Roseville. We have 5 wards: St. Ives, Wahroonga, Kumanara. So that's 3 wards that's been neglected. So essentially, I'm really quite tired of listening to things about Gordon Ward asking for $28 million. I can go on if they like to hear me say. It's in the papers as well. I mean, they can read it. $28 million that we don't have, and then now another $10 million which we don't have. We want to save that. This club is essentially useless. I mean, Councillor Nye was saying that he wished that he could save Roseville Chase as well. But then I remember clearly that he wanted R4 Roseville Chase. And if I am not mistaken, Councillor Smith asked...
I didn't say R4.
Councillor Smith asked both of them, the 2 of them, was it 3? R3, was it R3? R3, to get more money, right? So why not, Councillor Nye put in an amendment or a foreshadow to R3 this place? I might support him this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Smith?
I'll reserve my right. Thank you.
Councillor Kay?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've just got a question to Director Benasif, so if we can just scroll up a bit, if you don't mind. To when we talk about, back to the, there we go. We talk about temporarily restricts public access. Can you explain to me, Director Benasif, what that means and what is temporarily? Is this like the whole site, half the site, and how long is temporarily?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, temporarily refers to council making a decision what to do with the site, and then once that decision is made, the site is then assessed and opened in accordance with whatever plans the council has in mind or resolves.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Kay, any further questions?
Not at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Ward, then I'll go to Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Director Boninsef. I wanted to know that there are a number of recommendations the AG makes, so why would you not consider those? And also in the report, it talks about potential harm or potential contamination. It does not say conclusive.
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the report refers to restricting access to the site, and hence that's reflected in the recommendation.
Councillor Nye?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak against this motion, but first of all, I'd like to say that, look, whether it's in Wahroonga Ward, St. Ives Ward, Kumanara Ward, I would still be voting in the same way. It's based on my principles. Secondly, if you look a few months back, I did propose R3 for Roseville Chase, full knowing that based on evidence that we've been given, it will eventually become R3 anyway under potentially a future developer. So I have moved it in the past for my own ward, but I'm not going to do it on behalf of other councillors in another ward. Thirdly, I'd like to speak against this amendment, which is the officer's recommendation. My reason for this is I'm actually not sure why this is even a GB item. If I think about last year, during the pandemic, our playgrounds were shut down and parents were not allowed to send their children to the playgrounds. Why was that? On safety grounds. Who made that decision? It was a decision of council staff. It wasn't a decision of councillors. The general manager had the authority to call safety issues and take the relevant actions when necessary. Similarly, last year, for a period of about 1 day, Ku-ring-gai Council Chambers was fenced off for particular safety reasons. Were councillors involved? No. It was a decision under the General Manager's delegation. So similarly for this, I actually don't know why we are even discussing this at Council. I personally believe that the General Manager under delegation has the authority to make this happen even without consulting us as councillors. So I don't really see why we need to even be voting on this. So that's why I'm just going to vote against it on this particular occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knight. Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, just back through to Director Banassif. Director Banassif, could you just maybe, I suppose, reiterate some of the points, the risks, if we were not to proceed with the officer's recommendation? And then maybe it would be a question to Jamie Taylor, our corporate lawyer, what the risks and exposure to council once we've identified that we've got an issue with this site. So if I could just line up those two questions, please.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Director?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think the most significant risk that was identified was the bonded asbestos containing material in the as well as other chemicals in the soil profile. That was identified in the geotech reports. Council staff undertook a site hazard assessment based on the dilapidated infrastructure. That report is clearly and pretty easy to read. They've identified a number of site hazards that need to be removed or rectified, preferably removed, and the removal of those that infrastructure will has the potential will definitely impact the surface and will expose the contaminated soil, and that becomes a hazard in itself. From a liability point of view, I don't wish to delve into liability issues, but when we're talking about asbestos, it's certainly nothing to sneeze at, and it does raise some concerns.
Thank you very much. Just maybe through to Jamie Taylor regarding liability. Once this information that we've got before us in this report has been brought to this council, and I suppose the next thing is our responsibility as council is to ensure the safety of this old bowling club. Thank you.
Yep.
Corporate lawyer.
Mayor and councillors, council manages many assets, and many decisions are made which impact upon, I suppose, the risk exposure that council might have for many forms of liability. The information before council now is relevant to a decision of that nature. The cost to council can be intangible, such as reputation, but when it comes to potential legal liability at some point in time in the future, these are something that are measured and valued by council's insurers. We're required to have insurance for any types of liability, of which what's been spoken of here could fall within. And if council decides to manage its assets to a high level of risk, that is potentially reflected in a premium that the council pays going forward.
Councillor Smith. Okay.
So, Mr Taylor, just back through to you again. So, I appreciate the fact that we've got insurance that will cover us on this, and I'm assuming that if we were to be seen as being a reckless council, that our insurance would go up as well. And look, that's putting aside the major fact here. We're talking about people's health. I'm just, at the moment, talking about a monetary type of thing. But the risk, the reputation, and the cost, and if I'm not right, even, I don't know, as councillors sitting on here tonight, are we exposed to any form of risk if we're to push through when we've been given facts and figures on what the risks are, and that somebody unfortunately does come unstuck on this site.
Mr. Taylor?
The circumstances in which individual councillors might accrue a liability for a decision they make as part of a collegiate decision-making body, the council are fairly rare, although it's not impossible. I suppose that's much as I can say on that subject.
Councillor Smith, any further questions at this point?
I'll leave it at that, thank you.
Councillor Spencer?
Some questions.
Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, please. Thank you. If I may...
Indeed.
Mr. Mayor, so following on the interesting questions that raised my curiosity, the insurance and liability from that could be incurred by this club in the Golden Ward, who's paying for the insurance or the liability, if there was such, if there was lawsuit and so on? Is it paid by the entire LGA or just Golden Ward?
Mr. Taylor?
Any liability of council is borne by council as an entity, and it's not. There's no separate accounting of liability.
No separate accounting. Right.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Lennon?
Before I ask a question, I might just note that as a resident of Gordon, I'm very pleased to pay for the insurances to look after my friends in Ku-ring-gai ward. I think we're a municipality, and I'm very
Can we have that in writing, please? Now let's put it in writing, because the last time you said something about the philanthropists, and we don't see that coming back in writing.
My apologies if I can't quite follow the digression. What I would like to do is ask a question of Jamie Taylor, if I may. Councillor Nye said a moment ago, if I correctly understand, that under ordinary procedures, our staff have the authority to take measures related to health and safety without needing this resolution. I, for one, and I think all of us share Councillor Smith and Councillor Spencer's sentiments on safety and insurance costs, absolutely. But if this can be achieved by ordinary operational decisions without involving a council motion, as I think Councillor Nye suggested.
I think the question probably should go to Director Banasif.
Oh, my apologies.
Director?
Through Mr. Mayor, can I request that question again, please?
I think a more succinct question might help the Director.
In short, do council's operational staff have the authority to take measures related to closing any public recreational area in the municipality in the interests of safety without the need for a specific council resolution?
Director?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We quite often section off areas within our infrastructure due to safety matters. We do temporarily close sports fields when it's unsafe to play due to weather conditions or the condition of the field. But they're short term. And as I heard earlier regarding the playground closures, they were closed for the short term and is always planned for short term. This has the potential to be closed for quite some time. In my view, this will be closed for many years. Even if council chooses to remediate the site and turn it into open space, there is a process that needs to be followed, and a remediation action plan usually takes about better part of 6 months to develop, and then we need to fund the works, and we're talking in the order of millions. And so, in essence, it has the potential of being closed for years.
Thank you. And I would assume that those closures would be to the minimum necessary to ensure safety. They wouldn't be unduly onerous. They would simply be minimum both in terms of duration by time and in terms of the area that was actually secured.
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct, and hence why I haven't proposed or recommended the closure of the car park.
Thank you, Director.
Again, just to get back to the initial point, all that can be done without a council resolution.
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as far as I understand, I might refer that to the corporate lawyer.
Mr. Taylor?
Mayor and councillors, I might preface by what I'm about to say by just the observation that there's a number of matters that council comes before council for decision. Some of those matters are matters that can only be decided by council, and some are matters that could be decided by council or could be left to staff. In the case of operational decisions about managing land, certainly the staff have authority to give entry, to exclude people from land, to do many things associated with the management of the land, but that does not exclude council from taking involvement, particularly where there's maybe more important policy questions arising. So I think the answer to the question, I suppose, is yes, but there's reasons why council may wish to be given the opportunity to make some decisions where they've got important policy aspects to them.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Assistance.
Possibly best to stay there, save you walking backwards and forwards. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have similar properties all over Ku-ring-gai, and I was just wondering whether there are other properties or such bowling club sites or sporting ground sites that may have similar situations.
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I am unaware of any other sites. The reason for myself delving into this was due to the last council meeting where it was brought on the floor the potential hazards on site. So if I'm aware of any sites, we'll undertake a detailed investigation and report back to council if necessary.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Taylor.
Question for staff. I'm just curious to know if the site has been reported, if any injuries have been reported on the site since it became vacant.
Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not that I'm aware of.
Councillor Smith.
Director Banasif, I realise, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, through Director Banasif, I understand that you're not a health practitioner, but if somebody was to be exposed to any form of asbestos, what type of period of time are we taking for some signs and stuff to show up? Just being in the building industry and all?
Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, could be years, in my view, without being a health practitioner, but
Yeah, so I suppose my point there was with we would not have heard from what Councillor Taylor was referring to. We would not have heard of anything of yet, and wouldn't hear something for quite some time, or a number of years. Thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just picking up on Councillor Smith's question there, or remarks. My question through you, Mr. Mayor, is to Mr. Taylor. Given that we now know that there's perhaps asbestos, or there are some asbestos, could there be claims made against the council in years to come?
Mayor and councillors, it's
Mr.
very
Taylor?
difficult to speculate on the. I'm certainly not qualified to speculate on the probability of something like that. I think that probably the questions before you are maybe that, but also just the question of what represents good stewardship of that asset as by a council, with the knowledge that it has about the condition of the land.
Well, Mr. Taylor, I was just picking up on Councillor Smith's comments there that, it would be years before any signs of injury may show up.
Mr. Taylor?
I don't think I'm able to comment really much further about that observation.
Councillor Ward, particularly with asbestos and mesothelioma, it can be many years down the track before those symptoms and conditions actually become visible, I think. I think we're all well aware of James Hardy and asbestos and all those bad things that happen over many, many years. Councillor Smith?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Director Marshall. Just in regards to, I suppose, the estimated costs of the cleanup of this particular site, are we in a position, and I think this is just off the back of Director Banassif's response to how long this will take to possibly that it will need to be fenced off. What, have we got any chunk of change, spare money there just to throw at this to remedy this situation quickly so as we can give the local residents access to the old bowling club?
Director Marshall?
Mr. Mayor, there's obviously nothing has been planned to remediate the site. So if council wished to do so, it would need to transfer funds from other planned projects in order to remediate it.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Smith?
Thank you. I'll be speaking for this amendment that was put up. I think it's quite clear here tonight as councillors, I think that we have a responsibility to the public, not just purely a cost on how long it would physically take before somebody would have signs of suffering from asbestos that we were giving access to. I think it's also quite important of lately, we literally had our local federal member walking 20, I think there was 25 constituents across the site, which is a danger. So we've now got the opportunity.
Silence, please. Silence.
We before anybody
Silence.
starts to walk people through this site, where it's been identified that there's asbestos, where it's been identified as that we've got trip hazards, where it's been identified that there is a risk to the public, I believe that every one of these councillors here this evening should be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Silence. Councillor Nye.
Thank you. I've got a question to probably the corporate lawyer. So, as we know with asbestos, the impacts may not be noticeable for a very long period of time. If we do potentially have a resident who claims to be affected by this, say in 10 years' time or something like that, how easy would it be for them to prove that actually they got it from one of the 3 out of 22 locations on the Gordon Bowling Club site, as opposed to picking it up from some other part of Ku-ring-gai or some other part of the world?
Mr. Taylor?
Mayor and councillors, in terms of the question, I think it's very difficult it's hard to speculate, but I suspect that in most situations that you'd imagine it might arise, it might be very difficult to prove 100% causation from one particular site, but it might be very difficult to establish nil contribution from a contaminated site if there's evidence that it had been used or visited by the plaintiff.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I might just jump in with a quick question, seeing everybody's had a go. Director Banassif, apart from asbestos, what other issues or materials on site are we referring to as being potential hazards to the public?
Mr. Mayor, staff undertook a site risk assessment, and there are a number of infrastructure identified which were of risk. Star pickets, loose coggerhead iron, removal, there's trip hazards with sleepers, broken fence, but the most significant are the damaged benches, which the slats have been removed, and the concrete framework is still intact. There is concrete edges to the greens, which are ultimately a hazard in themselves. There are the soil bay needs to be removed, and there are a few taps on site which need to be identified, whether they're potable water or recycled water or isolated. And there's an electric box, which is exposed electrical box on site. These risks were identified, and they do exclude the buildings themselves.
Thank you, Director. Just a follow-up question. I see mention of lead-based paint and polychlorinated biphenyls. How dangerous are they to the general public should they suffer lead poisoning from paint? Silence.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not a chemical engineer myself, but I believe if the recommendation from the Geotech is to restrict public access to the site, I'd be assuming that they must be potentially harmful.
Thank you, Director. How difficult is it to remove lead-based paint and PCBs?
Through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, they are extremely difficult and extremely costly.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Lennon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I oppose this amendment. We are talking here about a bowling club. We're not talking about an open-cut mine or a petrochemical plant. It's a bowling club. For decades, lawn bowlers, often elderly, were able to negotiate this terrain without injury. They were able to move around without being infected. At the moment, as we understand, council staff has the power to take necessary measures for health and safety. And as we heard earlier, they will be the minimum area that needs to be sealed for the minimum period of time. And I have great confidence in staff carrying out those operational functions without getting a bit carried away and treating this site as something that it's not. It's a bowling club. And as one of the residents said to me, there are great sandstone blocks in our parks that he thought were a bigger hazard to anything at the Gordon Bowling Club site. There are probably gutters that are more of a hazard. There's lead-based paint, I suspect, in many a home. We don't live in a world of cotton wool. And if there are specific health and safety concerns, I have great confidence in staff to respond, to take the necessary measures, to seal as health and safety requires, the minimum area for the minimum period of time. So again, I oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Silence. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to speak against this amendment. Bowlers have used this site for decades, well within the reporting period of asbestos-related diseases. The community has used it safely for the last few years without a wave of injuries or accidents. I believe that the asbestos was identified in the detailed site investigation in 3 of 22 sites, all located in the northeast corner of the overall site. And the original motion that I think we should pass was proposing that we fence off that area and the clubhouse, and that way we can actually contain that asbestos risk and still allow the community to have access to this open space. We're not proposing to remediate asbestos, costing millions of dollars. There hasn't been a wave of accidents related to the community using this site. Let us simply fence off the northeast bowling green and the clubhouse and investigate priority risks for remediation, like the electricity box perhaps, maybe the concrete fences, I'm not sure. But let's focus on the priority risks and fence off the bowling green and the clubhouse. Let's vote against this amendment and pass the more reasonable amendment and allow the community to continue to use this open space.
Councillor Smith. Silence. How many times do I have to say it? I do have the option of removing the gallery, should you persist. Your choice. Your choice. Councillor One warning. Next time, the gallery will be removed. That means all of you. All of you who are here for other items. Councillor Smith.
Mr. Mayor, through you to Director Banasif, sorry. Director Banasif, in regards to the reports and everything that you've received on this site, are you confident, with your years of experience, are you confident and believe that this report should be the recommendations should be acted upon as they are currently put before this council on this amendment?
Director.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I'm provided a report recommending restricting public access to a site due to human health, high risks in human health exposure, I would be recommending, I would be following that recommendation, and hence why I brought it to council.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you. Also, again, maybe through to you, Director Banasif, have we had quite recently of schools throughout other council areas that have found that their children are sitting there amongst asbestos on the sites, falling, sort of breaking up? And if I've got this right, the issue with asbestos is as it's getting old and as it's degrading, it becomes more of an issue on the site. And I believe that that we've had quite a number of council areas that have had schools that have been heavily affected with children that have been exposed to asbestos, and it's been a high risk, and I believe the state government has actually been held to account on these things as well. So again, I think you're wondering what question I'm asking you. The question is, as far as it goes with the asbestos and the risk, I suppose, what we're talking about on this site, the risk of asbestos travelling, again, I suppose on that report that's been recommended, that's been put before the council, you think that that is the most safe way to be looking after our community to make sure that they are not exposed? I just would like you to confirm that for me.
Director.
In short, yes.
Thank you.
Through Mr. Mayor. But just make a point that it's never the first option to restrict public access to our community space. But like I mentioned earlier, it's only because the report is on my desk recommending restricting public access that this has landed here.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Mayor, can you just remind me how this issue came up in the first place in regarding this site with the contamination? How it actually came to this?
I believe that come in last council meeting and discussions were had, and it was raised that there was contamination on the site and there was asbestos on it.
Which councillors were they, sorry? Or councillor?
Director Watson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was asked a number of questions at the last council meeting where the issue of contamination was raised by a number of councillors. So that's where the issue was unpacked, and arising from or following on from that, Director Banasif has then gone to commission a report to look at the risks and the contamination risk. The contamination was identified in the Phase 1 and Phase 2 assessment reports when we first did the documentation for the planning proposal. So everybody knew it was there, but the issue was as trip hazards and as boreholes were dug, were the contaminants being redistributed on site? And the answer to that question is yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Kay.
Okay, this is a question for the General Manager, Mr. McKee. Are you confident with the abilities of your staff? And would you have any reason to doubt that the recommendation put forward is exaggerated in relation to safety concerns?
General Manager.
Councillor Kay, I have full confidence in staff, and no, I don't believe that the report exaggerates the concerns raised in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Banasif. The report lists down some 16 items that needs attention. How long has that bowling club been closed and in council's possession?
I believe that's since for 5 years approximately. 4 years approx, 4 to 5 years.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe it's 2018.
2018, yep.
18. Do we just leave properties without inspecting them?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that property has been maintained throughout the period in terms of mowing. It's on the mowing contract to ensure that it's in a neat and tidy state for the community.
For you, Mr. Mayor, clearly it hasn't been. If we have got sleepers that are broken, we have got shades, structures that are falling, edges of the bowling club green happening. Is that not part of a maintenance thing that you would normally look at?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, minimal money is spent on that site due to the current council position of the planning proposal which was brought forward to council tonight.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, just one more question. But if you've got picket fence, loose corrugated irons hanging around, shades hanging around, would you not have seen that as a hazard and it needed attention?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there have been a number of serious hazards on site that we have temporarily repaired with minimal funds, but temporary repairs are exactly that. They don't last a distance. So upon our site inspection, that temporary repair has obviously not lasted very long and needs to be rectified or best removed from the site.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Councillor, it's certainly an interesting one, isn't it? Councillor Lennon, you certainly were quite confident in staff doing the right sort of thing as securing a site, and you're correct. We do have good staff. They know what they're doing. You did agree that we did need to secure the site and staff would do what the appropriate action. The appropriate action is actually the recommendation that we've got up on the screen. When we identify hazards, it is up to all of us to do the right thing by our residents, by the council. To ignore a recommendation and a report by experts and then to tinker with it, I don't think that's the right way of doing it. We are here to make the best decisions based on the information in the reports that are given to us. And we have an expert report, third-party report, impartial report. We give staff the impetus to close locations as and when they see fit on a temporary basis. They do the right thing. With this site, it is not just a quick closure. It is a long-term closure due to the issues on site. Do I want to expose council and also potentially councillors from litigation? Should we ignore the reports? I don't think that's a wise decision, not from my perspective. I'm not prepared to do it. I don't think other councillors should, just to keep some residents happy that they can access part of the site. As we know, the more you dig up and the more you remove those hazards, the more disturbed the soil will become. You won't get to see those contaminants flying around. They won't stop at the fence that you put halfway through the site. They will continue on. And yes, I was on site at that rally with Paul Fletcher, but I certainly wasn't going to walk around it knowing what was there, potentially. When you know a hazard is there, do you go to it or do you go away from it? Do you encourage others to venture into it or venture away from it? Remember, we've got to make decisions to look after our residents, not to put them in jeopardy. council staff and the experts, that's the recommendation. Unless you councillors know more than the experts, which I don't think any of us do, I don't think any of us are more qualified in remediation of asbestos, lead-based paints, PCBs, and other hazards on the site. So I would encourage councillors to look after your residents, to support the officer's recommendation. You can't be half pregnant in this situation. It's either keep the site completely open or keep it completely closed. Don't go halfway. Are there any further speakers on the matter? I will put Councillor Spencer's amendment. And before we do that, Councillor Lennon, do you wish to sum up? No, not yet. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. So this is one of those funny situations again where we're talking about being experts in a field, in a domain. I think councillors have to make decisions about traffic, we have to make decisions about planning, we have to make decisions about lots of domains that we're not expert in. I think most of our decisions are like that. The idea that we are better than an expert in this field is not the case here. I believe that what we're putting forward in the original motion is more reasonable. I too was there over the weekend with my lovely wife and my photogenic dog, and it was beautiful. There were people playing there, and there were people playing there safely. I think we can contain the asbestos risk by cordoning off the northeast bowling green and by cordoning off the dilapidated clubhouse. So I urge my fellow councillors to vote against this amendment, and let's pass the original motion.
So I'll put Councillor Spencer's amendment. All those in favour? That is Councillor Spencer, Kay, Wheatley, Smith, Pettit. Those against? Councillors Alec Taylor, Councillor Ward, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Nye. That is 5-5. I will use my casting vote in favour of the amendment. The amendment now becomes the motion. And I'm happy to put the motion as is. All those in favour of the motion? That is Councillor Spencer, Kay, Wheatley, Smith, Pettit. Those against? Councillor Alec Taylor, Ward, Lennon, Taylor and Nye. That being 5-5, I use my casting vote in favour of the motion. It is carried. We now move to the notice of motions, NM1, which is rescission by councillors Kay.
If I could just get...
Councillors Kay, Nye and Taylor. Councillor Kay.
Okay, I've got, if I could just bring that up on the screen. So, Mr Mayor, I wish to move the rescission motion and also foreshadow a motion should the rescission be successful.
Thank you, Councillor Kay.
Bring that up.
Second for that? Councillor Taylor, Councillor Kay.
Okay, so I move that the resolution of the ordinary meeting of Council on the 28th of June regarding the status of the Women's Advisory Committee be rescinded. So I'll put that motion up, but I'll speak to the rescission first, if that's okay, Mr Mayor. Okay, so this is in relation to the reason for the rescission, which I think is always good. Now, sorry if I'm a bit nasally here, I'll do my best. Okay, so the background in relation to the rescission was two councillors, Councillor Cedric Spencer and Councillor Alec Taylor, were not in attendance at the ordinary meeting of Council in June, so they were not able to add their view or input into the discussion on the night. This committee seems to be unlike any other committee in the current council term, and that is the only committee that has all councillors as committee members. All the other council committees now have councillors who are not members as observers only, which means they're unable to speak. It appears that the Status of Women's Committee has been targeted with a bias, as it would be the only committee to have these rules. This motion has eliminated 5 women's voices from the group, of the community, as the group was allegedly too big, therefore reducing the female participation from 15 females to 10 female applicants, to be replaced with 7 male voices from councillors. There was no explanation as to why those individuals were chosen by the group of 5 councillors who voted for the change, only that they voted to reduce the group number. Not all councillors were consulted. At least 5 from the 10 were not approached regarding the predetermined names by the other 5 councillors. And in my opinion, I believe that this has been personal choices from some councillors as well as political, due to the high quality of standard candidates that applied. The public weren't privy to the discussion due to the confidential session, which was only to discuss the committee names that were chosen. And in hindsight, I believe we should have gone back to open discussion in the chamber so that we are transparent to the community with our discussions. I'm concerned that 2 councillors feel that this committee is discriminatory against men. The mover of the motion, Councillor Pettit, voted for terms of reference along with Councillor Smith last council term, but seem to have changed their mind with no explanation why 8 additional councillors, which includes 7 men, have been added to this committee. The recommended committee members were selected by a panel of staff members and a community member. It concerns me that the applicants that have been culled did not come from the recommendations of staff, but by individual councillors. This committee was created to give women a voice and empower them. This change with additional committee members who are men does the exact opposite and steers away from the purpose of the committee and its creation. The Status of Women's Committee draft terms of reference includes the primary role of Status of Women is to, 1, provide advice, advocate and raise awareness of issues that impact women in Ku-ring-gai community. The responsibilities are to identify and participate in projects, activities and opportunities that promote the inclusion of women in the community. Where appropriate, participation in and provide advice and feedback on council's planning processes, project events and policies. The committee creation was to elevate specific women's issues by giving women a voice and the opportunity in planning and improving these services. The committee indicator is to make women feel valued, engaged and empowered to participate in their own way without judgment. Now, I've got some questions, if I may. If that's okay, can I lead into a question?
You only have to ask questions about why it should be rescinded.
Okay. It does relate to why it's to one of the council staff members. So it relates to my rescission in relation to the 15 names and the selection process, which is part of my rescission, not having the 15 names and having them reduced to 10.
One moment, Councillor Kay. I'll refer to the General Manager.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Kay, you can use that as a reason as to why the decision should be revisited, but in terms of councillors' prerogative as to which names they choose to pick, unless it's unlawful, it's a valid decision of the council unless otherwise rescinded.
So you're basically saying I can ask that question if the rescission is successful in the next component.
Through you, Mr Mayor, just so all councillors are clear, so when a rescission comes to council, it's a 2-part process. The first part we are doing now is where councillors who are authors of the rescission try to establish to their colleagues why the standing resolution of council should be rescinded and revisited. If that fails, the resolution from the former council meeting stands. The rescission fails, there's no further debate. If the rescission is successful, as Councillor Kay has said, she has foreshadowed what she would replace the previous council decision with if she gets the support to rescind that decision.
It's clear. Seconder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I believe that having 3 councillors on the committee is a far better outcome than having 10. I think 10 is unwieldy and unnecessary and would be extraordinary as well. Although I wouldn't rule out having a man on the committee, a male councillor on the committee at some point. I see no need for them to be all women. I think in the first place it probably makes sense, but in the future it could well have a male councillor on the committee. I actually share the view of many other councillors that 15 is a big number for a committee, for a number of community members. I'm a little bit nervous about that. I've been told that you get a lot of no-shows. I'm not sure about that. But one thing I could say is that I've spoken to staff about how they chose these 15 people, and they went through a robust process. The process involved actually a community member that helped them. They did a lot of work on, as a panel, selecting these 15. So I trust that the staff have done a good job of selecting 15, and I do think that it makes sense for us to rescind the motion to restrict the number to 10 and to rescind the motion to allow all councillors to be on the committee as voting members.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Lennon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I just ask a question of Jamie Taylor? When this was flagged, or we discussed this some months ago, I advocated that only female councillors be part of it. At that time, your thought was that we couldn't do that, that it was discriminatory. Is that still your view, that we can't limit this to female councillors? Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, I'm not quite sure how that relates to the rescission, but...
Oh, sorry, that was the foreshadowed motion, Mr.
So it's not part of the
motion
rescission.
talks about all councillors who are women.
We haven't got to that part.
Oh, my apologies.
That's okay. Councillors, there being no further discussion on this particular rescission, all those in favour of the rescission motion? That is unanimous. Councillor Kay, you have a foreshadowed motion? Which is now the motion.
Okay. All right. So
you will need a seconder for that. Seconded, Councillor Alec Taylor.
thank you, Alec Taylor. Now I might ask the question. I'll start with the question, if that's okay, before I speak on it. And that is through you, Mr. Mayor, to the relevant director. I just wanted to talk about the process, okay, of the applicants. So why 15 was chosen, and potentially maybe talk about the different categories
Director?
that they fell into. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. The terms of reference came to council some time ago. The recommendation for 15 came from a number of areas. We looked at terms of reference from other councils, other groups. They had similar, or if not the same, amount of people on the committee. We also, I was advised by staff that sometimes people are not able to attend, so if we had 15. We also looked at broad categories as well, so we tried to cover different categories of people, their professionalism and the groups that they represented.
Thank you, Director.
So I will just maybe speak on those categories so people have an understanding, because they came under 6 categories. So women, business and professional women, women with Indigenous and non-speaking backgrounds, young women under the age of 25, individuals with specialist skills in women's health and well-being, other community members with an active interest in women's issues, women from organisations already representing female residents or with experience lobbying for women's interests. So back to you, Director Bevan. Do you feel that in that 15 we have covered those categories?
Director?
Mr. Mayor and councillors, yes, I feel that's adequately covered there.
Thank you. Okay, so now I will speak on this motion. So as a council, so Firstly, I'd like to refer to the mayoral minute in May where we spoke about all councillors can attend as observers and not speak. The same 5 councillors that voted for observers not able to speak, as they feared councillors would derail the meeting and use political motivation. These are the same 5 councillors that have voted for all 10 councillors to speak on the status of Women's Committee. This is hypocrisy and double standard at its best, and what women have been fighting for the last 100 years, to have a voice. It only creates more disappointment that female councillors also voted for this. Currently, as the motion stands, so not this motion, but the previous original motion, we would have had 35% of the members in the committee who are able to be vocal as men. As a council, we have taken a backward step in female representation on our council. Over the years, we have gone from 60% to 30%, which is currently what we have now. We have councils like Knox in Victoria who have 8 out of 9 councillors who are women. Work needs to be done. I sit on the ALGWA board, which is the Australian Local Government Women's Association, where Ku-ring-gai Council is also a member. And I know specific councillors here had attended that particular forum. I believe Councillor Wheatley attended the one that we had in relation to talking about more women into local government. My original notice of motion to create this committee was presented to Council 12 months ago, and here we are still trying to get the committee off the ground. We have local groups that have members who cater for the needs of men. Men's Kitchen, Mentoring Men, which Men's Kitchen I believe is a new group. While we also have groups that cater for the issues of women in Ku-ring-gai. We have Girl Guides, we have the Hornsby Ku-ring-gai Women's Shed, we have women's gyms. The importance of such committee, and this particular committee, is to address gender equality issues. There are issues like, for example, sanitary item dispensers in public toilets. These are specific female issues. And again, the committee indicator is to make women feel valued, engaged and empowered to participate in their own way without judgment. If we want to make all committees equal, we should open all committees to all councillors as members instead of discriminating against this one. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to foreshadow a motion.
You would have to move an amendment.
I can't foreshadow a motion at this point.
There's only a need to foreshadow, Councillor Taylor, when there's already a motion and an amendment on the table. At this point, there's only a motion.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Am I able to foreshadow a motion?
You would be moving an amendment.
Amendment to the motion.
You're moving an amendment, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I commend Councillor.
Before you do that, it needs to go up on the board, assuming staff have it.
They have it there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, I'll let you read that before calling for a seconder.
Yep.
It's not very long. Is there a seconder for this one? Seconder, Councillor Wheatley. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the forum will be open to a wider group of audience and will provide a platform for all women to attend, and not just 10, 12 or 15 picked out by the number applied. The forum can have high-profile speakers, cover burning topics, and we can have outcomes with some action items and indeed a review or alignment to our strategic plan. The first forum will be interesting, will encapsulate what the thinking is and what do women want the council to focus on as their needs, and the intervals at which they would like to hold these forums, i.e. half-yearly or quarterly or bi-monthly. This can be decided at the inaugural forum. Monthly advisory committee can be time-consuming and sometimes inefficient use of time and resources. I find forums to be an excellent way to engage with wider community on particular issues that can assist with policy formulation for the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. As seconder, Councillor Wheatley, do you wish to speak at this point?
Reserve my right, please.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, I would like to foreshadow a motion.
Okay, thank you. Does he have to announce it? Councillor Taylor, would you like to announce your foreshadowed motion?
Am I required to?
General Manager?
I'm happy to. General Manager, I'm happy to. So simply put, what I'm proposing in the foreshadowed motion is a compromise that involves a smaller committee with 3 councillors. I don't specify the gender of those councillors, although I believe it would be appropriate for it to be the 3 women councillors at the moment. I just envisaged if there were 10...
That's probably all that you need to say, yep.
Thank you.
Speakers on the amendment. Councillor Ward, an interesting concept with forums. I know that the sports forum worked exceptionally well. We had a full room plus. Certainly a forum does give the opportunity for more women's voices to be heard that I can see. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Are there any reasons that I can see for a forum not working well? I don't think so. It certainly does allow some flexibility, a number of attendees to attend. Literally, we could have as many people attend as so desire to attend. Imagine having a forum in the council chambers here and filling that up. That's a lot of voices, and each one of them equal. That's a good result. I'm sure if forums are successful, which no doubt they will be, we can continue on that progress. We're not restricting people. We're not culling them based on a list. Everybody is treated equally. Everybody can attend, and that's a good thing. We don't have to have staff pick and choose who turns up to a forum. Again, that's a good thing. Councillor Ward, you have your light on. You have
I'm sorry.
You have a question?
Well, Mr. Mayor, not really a question. I just really wanted to circle back to Councillor Kay's comments about...
If you could frame a question with that potentially.
I will. If we did have the forum, would Councillor Kay, through you, Mr. Mayor, not see that as encouraging wider group of women to be interested in becoming local councillors in Ku-ring-gai Council?
Councillor Kay?
A forum is a very weak alternative, and a forum could be included in the committee.
That's not actually the question that was asked about the merits of the forum. It was more...
Well, as I said, I think the forum is a weak alternative, so I don't feel it has merit in here at the end of the day. It has merit in it's isolated, but here we are trying to create a status of women's...
You're actually debating, you're not actually answering the question, so can you be precise with your answer relating to the question?
That is my answer.
Okay. Councillor Nye? Unless Councillor Ward, you have another question? Councillor Nye?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak briefly against this motion. I'm actually in support of the concept of
It's an amendment, Councillor Nye.
This amendment, sorry. I'm actually in support of the concept of hosting a forum, and I believe it's a good idea. However, I disagree with point B, that the committee needs to be dissolved. I believe that, if we wanted to, we could do both. We could have a forum and invite as many people as possible, and we could also have a committee as well. I mean, the staff have already done all the work in going out to the public, shortlisting candidates, proposing who will be on the committee. Why don't we have the committee as staff had originally proposed, and also run a forum? And whether we decide to run a forum today or whether it's for a separate notice of motion next month, happy for that to happen. But I really believe it shouldn't be either this or that. You could potentially have both. But just because there are slight differences doesn't mean we should shoot either of ideas down straight away. We have seen last council term that some committees, such as Finance Committee or Linfield Village Hub Reference Committee, they get stood up, they run for a year or two, then we decide, well, some councillors, majority of councillors decide it's no longer appropriate to run, and that's completely fine. But before we even I don't think we should dissolve a committee even before we even have the chance of running it. If we want forums, fine, let's do that. It would be a fantastic idea. It'll be good for Ku-ring-gai. But we also have this idea of a committee, and we should give that an opportunity as well. And if it looks like either the forum or the committee aren't working well in the future, then yeah, we can revisit later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. Councillor Kay.
Okay, this is a question probably for you, Mr. Mayor. When we talk about committees, how many committees do we have?
I'll refer the number to General Manager, Director Corporate. Director?
Mr. Mayor, we have 7 advisory committees. That includes the status of Women's Advisory Committee.
And how many of those committees are new committees that the terms of reference have not yet come to council?
Director?
Mr. Mayor, all of those committees, their terms of reference have been to council.
Does that include the Multicultural Committee?
Sorry, Mr.
Director?
Mayor. Yeah, sorry, the Multicultural Committee is not on my list. I was looking at the guideline. It hasn't been updated since the new one has been created. My apologies.
And how many committees have had forums? Or forums before becoming a committee?
Director?
That's not something I'm able to answer at this point.
You
Mr.
want to
Mayor.
take that on notice?
Happy to, yep.
Okay, I've got another question for Director Bevan. Okay, when you talked about the quality of the applicants. Can you just confirm how many applicants applied? I believe it's 28, if I recall from memory, give or take.
Director, can you confirm 28?
Mr. Mayor and Councillors, I feel it was probably more like 24 or 25, but it was certainly more than 20. I can take that on notice as well. I can go back over all these notes that I've got, but it was more than 20.
Thank you, Director.
Director Bevan, when we were culling this committee, was that a difficult decision to make with the quality of the applicants to narrow it down to 15?
Director?
Mr. Mayor and Councillors, some people didn't meet the criteria and some did. Yeah,
Okay. Now, I've got a question for you, Mr. Mayor. You supported the terms of reference last term. Why have you changed your mind?
I think all councillors can revisit decisions that were made. In previous decisions,
Can you give me a legitimate reason to why there is a change? Why did you change your mind?
Because I chose to.
Councillor Smith, if I have a question for you, you also changed your mind when it came to the terms of reference, and this was voted on unanimously last term. It's only now changed when, and everyone was aware of 15 women's voices on this. Why did you change your mind?
Well, I had quite a bit of time to consider what you had put forward before and then what you put forward again. One of the things that I must say I was not very happy with, we had one female councillor that was actually left out of this, which I personally feel was pretty ordinary, but in any case, I'll push that aside. Secondly, I think with looking at it and having more time to revisit it, and the discussions of what Councillor Ward has brought up in the regards to forums and so forth, I thought that it could be a greater benefit to Ku-ring-gai and to encourage more women to be involved in local government. Thank you.
Okay, now I'll just revisit what you said about if we go back to my motion, I actually have changed it to include all female councillors.
Councillor Kay, you asked me in regards to, from what I was supporting, why I did
I know that was a statement. That was not a question.
Councillor Kay, can you then ask a question? Unless you're debating the topic.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions for
Thank
you,
you.
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to briefly speak to this motion. I think Part A of this amendment is fantastic. I don't think we need to dissolve the committee to do it. And as part of my foreshadowed motion, I would like to include Part A as another item.
Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I have a question to Councillor Kay. Councillor Kay, there are two other female councillors here. You're great in promoting women's advocacy, and it's commendable. Could you tell us how much assistance do you think you have given the two councillors that are here and that are new?
Councillor Kay?
This is not up to me to give assistance, and at the end of the day, we're not talking about us, we're talking about the greater community. And I do recall in the last session, Councillor Ward, that you also said that the status of Women's Committee was not a counselling service, and I found that an absolute insult.
Councillor Ward, you have another question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kay, with all due respect, if we're going to be advocating for anything, then we must be advocating for it totally and wholesomely. We can't pick and choose. I asked Councillor Kay once again if she was going to or is helping the two new councillors, female councillors, on this council in any shape and form.
Councillor Kay?
It's up to the individual councillors to ask for help at the end of the day. I am here to do my job, and that is to support all councillors. And I have been very supportive of other councillors, but I don't recall yourself, Councillor Ward, or Councillor Wheatley opening themselves up to me and being warm and welcoming either.
I think that's almost going to the point of being a little bit, shall we say? I'll leave it at that. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you.
You must have finished both of your bottles there, I can see.
Yes, I took a cue from you. I thought I should have a go as well. Question to the General Manager, if I may. When new councillors provided training, support and further training, some of them have to go through retraining, especially for conflicts of interest and all those things.
General Manager.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, all councillors received an induction program, which was rolled out over a period of time. And you are correct in terms of code of conduct. All councillors have been through training twice since they were elected last year.
Are any of those training or trainings provided by existing councillors or past councillors?
General Manager.
No, they are not.
Do we have a buddy system where a councillor has to assist a new councillor?
No, we do not.
Thank you. Question for Councillor Kay. Councillor Kay, in your status of Women's Advisory Committee, is there anything in the terms of reference or the resolution that would proscribe the committee from conducting forums?
Councillor Kay.
No, there isn't. Forums would actually be part of the committee as well as organising events, i.e. International Women's Day. So no, Councillor Spencer.
Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, I think we may have 2 for and 2 against.
General Manager, is that correct?
Mr Mayor and councillors, for the amendment are Councillors Ward, Wheatley and Mayor Pettit, and against we have had Councillor Nye and Councillor A. Taylor. That is correct.
So you're moving that the amendment be put?
I'm moving that, thank you.
All those in favour of the amendment being put? That is Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Wheatley, Councillor Smith, Councillor Ward, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Pettit and Councillor Nye. Those against? Councillor Spencer, Kay and Councillor Greg Taylor. That means we put the amendment. We are putting Councillor Ward's amendment. All those in favour of Councillor Ward's amendment, which is up on the screen. Councillors Wheatley, Smith, Ward, Lennon, Pettit. Those against? Those against, Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Nye. That being 5-5, I use my casting vote in favour of the amendment. The amendment now becomes the motion. To sum up.
No, we introduce Councillor Taylor's foreshadowed.
Councillor Taylor, you have a foreshadowed motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor. I actually voted in favour. Yep. So you can move a further amendment, should you so desire.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think there's really any point at this point in moving my amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. So I'll put the motion as per the screen, which is Councillor Ward and Councillor Wheatley's. All those in favour? Councillors Wheatley, Smith, Ward, Lennon and Pettit. Those against? Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Nye. That being 5-5, I use my casting vote in favour of the motion. That motion is carried. Councillors, we move to NM2, which is Councillor Kay's motion. Councillor Kay?
Yes. Hopefully my throat holds up. Okay, so NM2, which is Ku-ring-gai as a dementia-friendly community. So I'd like to move the motion as printed.
You're moving it as printed?
Yeah, but I want to speak on it, so yes.
You'll need a seconder for that. There being no seconder, Councillor Taylor.
Okay.
Councillor Kay.
All right, so this is NM2, so let's have a look here. Okay, so Ku-ring-gai is a dementia-friendly community. So approximately 4 years ago, I had started on this journey back in 2018. It commenced as an election promise in my flyer when I ran in the by-election in October 2018. I started this journey with council staff in July 2019. So it's taken a long time to get to this point, with a variance of factors holding it up, including COVID. I have worked with council closely and community leaders, and after several meetings, we're finally here. At the July Forum, we had 2 experienced community leaders speak on this topic, and I thank them both for their support. We are very fortunate to have both Tim England and Michelle Bell within our community, and I embrace their involvement. I will highlight a couple of areas and some brief notes and facts that I found interesting that Tim England provided. Firstly, he's put, consider this. There are 10 council representatives from Ku-ring-gai Council. Based upon current statistics, if all of you were 65 years old, 1 of you would have dementia. If all of you were 80 years old, 3 of you would have dementia. If you're all 90 years old, 5 of you would have dementia. So these are a few statistics also about the Ku-ring-gai LGA. In 2022, there are about 3,700 people living with dementia. This is over 2.9% of the local population, almost twice the national average. Over 2,500 are still living in the community. There is a new case every 3 to 4 days. By 2030, almost 4,500 locals will have dementia. This will be 4% of the local population by 2030 based on current population trends. The 2021 census reveals that there are 30,956 people over 60 years of age, which is significantly higher when compared to Australia and Greater Sydney and slightly higher than neighbouring LGAs. Ku-ring-gai has an ageing population, and this trend is expected to continue for the next 25 to 30 years. Councillors, I also have 3 letters of support. So from both our state members, the Honourable Jonathan O'Dea and the Honourable Alistair Henskins, and I also have one from Dementia Australia. So I'll just highlight a couple of components, and these are all in relation to supporting the notice of motion. So from Jonathan O'Dea, the Honourable Jonathan O'Dea, we have the proposed initiative would admirably support people living with dementia to experience a high quality of life. It will also educate communities to recognise those living with dementia as valued members of our community. The Honourable Alistair Henskins. In my role as a member for Ku-ring-gai, I have met many residents living with dementia, and I see firsthand the difference that initiatives such as the Decaf Cafe have made to their lives and those of their carers and family members. These initiatives not only work to provide a valuable social outlet for people living with dementia, but also provide a supportive environment in which families and carers can meet and discuss their experiences. I strongly encourage Ku-ring-gai Council to develop a dementia action plan to develop ways to support people with dementia in the local community. This is from Dementia Australia. So Belinda Curtis, she's the National Manager. As the National Manager of the Dementia Friendly Communities Program, I am delighted to recognise the commitment you have made in your motion to creating a dementia friendly community in Ku-ring-gai. The establishment of a Dementia Alliance is a great first step, and we would be pleased to support you and the local community to achieve this goal. By including people living with dementia and carers, you will ensure the action plan is informed by the experiences of people impacted by dementia, and by doing so create a space for meaningful and impactful change. Linking the creation of the Dementia Alliance to the Ku-ring-gai Council's Disability Inclusion Action Plan is commended and should provide an important mechanism to track progress and maintain commitment at all levels of the community. In addition, your motion that Council provides dementia training to staff to build awareness and understanding of people with dementia's needs is foundational to creating a dementia-friendly community. Dementia Australia offers a range of educational and training options that may suit Council's needs, and we would be happy to discuss them with you. So on that note, just in time, I highly suggest to councillors that I'd appreciate your support on this motion, and look forward to hopefully adding ourselves to the list of many other dementia-friendly communities, which would include the Northern Beaches, Kiama and Hornsby Council. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
I reserve my right, thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Mr Mayor, I have a question.
Fire away, Councillor Ward.
My question is, Mr Mayor, to Director Bevan. Director Bevan, does the Council have any plans underway in regards to a Dementia Alliance? If yes, when did it commence?
Director.
Mr Mayor and Councillors, Council has a disability inclusion and access plan which was developed back about 2014. It's been updated recently. One of the goals within that plan is to establish communities of interest, which includes dementia-friendly communities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Director Bevan, sorry to you again. Do you know, or are you aware of that Councillor Kay is aware of the work that's being conducted? And if Councillor Kay did, have you had any dialogue with Councillor Kay about it?
Director?
Mr Mayor and Councillors, Councillor Kay did mention that she's been working with the staff with this. So I'm assuming she is aware as well.
Is aware of
what the staff are doing.
Okay. Through you, Mr Mayor, Director Bevan, Ku-ring-gai Rotary Club is supporting DCAP at West Pymble. Does the council support this, and how and since when? And are there any other DCAPs the council supports?
Director?
Mr Mayor and Councillors, yes, the council has been working. Our disability services and our aged services staff have been working with the dementia cafes that have been established. So yes, we are working with them.
Thank you, Director.
Okay. It seems that perhaps some of us were not aware of the work that's being done. Through you, Mr Mayor, would Director Bevan be willing to give us a briefing on that?
Mr Mayor and Councillors, you mean at a separate time we can brief the council?
Yep.
Of course, yes.
Okay. Yep, thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Were you looking to move an amendment then, Councillor Ward, potentially? So the briefing's a little bit out of the ordinary. So, do staff have that wording, or is that just on the fly? So is that the wording you're looking at, Councillor Ward? Okay. And a seconder for that? Seconded Councillor Smith. Councillor Ward, it's your amendment.
Nothing further to add to what we've already said, Mr Mayor, other than that I feel that this briefing would assist other councillors as to what we have done thus far, and if we were to
Dementia Alliance, I think that's what you... Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Mr Mayor, I'd just probably like just to reiterate the points that Councillor Ward's made there. I think it would be of a great assistance to councillors, even to Councillor Kay, as Councillor Ward just spelt out, and might even give the opportunity to sort of move something a bit different down the track. So I welcome the opportunity for this to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I might just chime in as well too. Certainly a Dementia Alliance and a Dementia Action Plan are certainly things that we need to investigate and learn things more about. I'm sure that Councillor Kay has quite an extensive knowledge in that area, and I believe potentially Councillor Ward might well too. Councillor Spencer.
Questions, please.
Fire
Mr
away.
Mayor, through you to the General Manager, have councillors been provided training in relation to requesting for briefing, where they do not have to pass a motion, they just have to send an email and request for a briefing?
General Manager?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that is...
Let's play it up. Director Bevan, if you could take... Thank you.
Sorry. Through you, Mr Mayor, that is correct. You don't need a formal resolution under the Local Government Act to organise a briefing with councillors.
So, Mr. Mayor, I can't understand why we are here. I said this thing at the last meeting, where we come to council meeting to make substantive decisions. not to come here and ask for reports and ask for a briefing. Could have done it with an email. So this is not a proper notice of motion or amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Lennon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question of Director Bevan, just to understand what you said earlier. In essence, are you saying that the work of this wonderful motion is already underway? In a broad sense, it's already happening? Is that what you're saying?
Director.
Mr. Mayor and Councillors, that's correct, Councillor Lennon. We have been working for some time towards this. As a matter of fact, we have a meeting with Dementia Australia on the 23rd of August to progress it as well.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Kay.
Okay, just a point of clarity. When we talk about my dealings with council staff, I had met with Mr. Hausius a period of time. Also, the other staff members in yours, I've had 2 or 3 meetings with community representatives, one quite recent, which was Michelle Bell, and this was to start driving this. As you can see, we've been in this limbo land since I started this journey 3 years ago. It's now time to push on and have action. Now, I know as part of the process, and I could be under the belief, and I'll ask you, Director Bevan, that council laws would be getting updates anyway to the progression of this alliance. And that was the impression that I got from Mr. Hausius. Is that correct?
Director.
Mr. Mayor and Councillors, we do report quarterly on our delivery plan. So, yes, if councillors had read through that, there would be updates regularly. What I would say, though, is through COVID, well, obviously people weren't going out and meeting in cafes, and we probably put our energy into doing online programs and things like that. So our focus was deferred for some time there, but we are progressing it now.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you to Director Bevan, are you saying that it almost sounds like this motion is not lawful as it is asking us to do something that we're already doing? Is that what you're saying? Are we already planning to do this, create this community, what is it called? Dementia-friendly community? Are we already planning to do that as part of our normal business without this motion?
Director?
Mr. Mayor and Councillors, that's correct.
I would probably have to inject there at the end of the day because...
No, you can't. You either debate or ask a question. Councillor Spencer?
I have a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Ward. Would you not waste our time and just vote against Councillor Kay's motion instead of putting up an amendment that looks like that? That's my question. Withdraw it.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am happy with my amendment of the motion that's there.
Councillors, there'll be no further lights on. I'm happy to move that amendment, which is Councillor Ward's amendment, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favour? Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Wheatley, Councillor Smith, Councillor Ward, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Pettit. Those against? Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Greg Taylor and Councillor Nye. The amendment is carried. The amendment becomes the motion. I'm quite happy to put the motion as is. All those in favour? Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Wheatley, Councillor Smith, Councillor Ward, Councillor Lennon, Councillor Pettit. Those against? Councillors Spencer, Kay, Greg Taylor and Nye. Motion is carried. Councillors, I might just call for a quick 5-minute pit stop and refresh. We have been going a couple of hours so far, so I think looking at you could all do with a quick refresh. So we'll have a quick 10-minute adjournment. All those in favour? That's unanimous.
Well, I wonder. I wonder.
This is true. This is true. People make their own decisions.
Councillors, if you could resume your seats, we're now live again. Councillors, we move to NM3, which is motion by Councillor Alec Taylor and Councillor Kay. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move the motion as printed with a couple of minor changes.
And staff have those ready on the board.
Staff have
Excellent.
them ready. And just while they're bringing them up, they are minor wording changes to points A and B that don't change the meaning of those 2 points. And then a change to point 3 to request a briefing from staff more generally rather than a report. I don't think we need a report. I think a briefing is probably more appropriate than a report.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's all Schmick up there, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, so the minor wording change is just to simplify the language in point A to just say at least 40% women rather than the 3 dot points that's printed in the original motion. There's a minor wording change to the second point as well. And then the material changes to request a briefing rather than a report for point C.
Councillor Kay as co-author, you wish to second that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Taylor, you have the call.
I'd like to reserve my right to speak to it.
After all that, you must have said it already. Councillor Kay.
I will also reserve my right at this point in time. Thank you.
It's a lot of reserving. Just checking, Councillor and I, are you with us? Just making sure. Thank you for a thumbs up.
Yes.
Councillors, this is all fairly quiet at the moment. Have we run out of steam? I know Councillor Spencer did mention he didn't want to have more briefings.
Speak if you like.
I'm sure you can. Interesting. All right. Do we have any speakers on this particular matter? Well, councillors, it's certainly an interesting concept that's been thrown up here, I must admit. I see, which is a little bit difficult for me, I'll read it off the General Manager's screen. General Manager, in regards to the 40% of the senior leadership team by 2030, how far away from that are we now? How many females would we need to employ? Director Corporate? Director Marshall?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the moment, we are at 31%, and I believe if we employed another 2 or 3 females, that would get us to the 40%.
So it's quite reachable by 2030, given the it's 8 years away. So literally, if we had a staff turnover and they were replaced by females, we would get there potentially fairly quickly. Is that the way you see it?
I do, Mr. Mayor, yes.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Kay, I believe you're ready to rock with either a question?
Oh, no, I want to speak now, if that's okay.
Oh, indeed, you can speak.
Yes, thank you. I just thought it was courteous that we did actually get a letter of support from the Australian Gender Equality Council, so I wanted to read that out so the community would actually hear what that letter of support was. So it's from Coral Ross, and she's the chair of the Australian Gender Equality Council. So this is in relation to this. I'm writing in support of the notice of motion from Councillors Taylor and Kay, dated the 8th of July 2022, concerning a long-term gender equality target. Gender equality is where people of all genders have equal rights, equal access and equitable outcomes. As you know, elected councillors set the culture of the council. It is important for councillors to demonstrate leadership, and this motion gives councillors the opportunity to show their commitment to gender equality. It also provides you with the opportunity to show leadership not only in Ku-ring-gai Council but in New South Wales. The motion affords councillors the opportunity to express their values and say, as an elected body, we would want the council administration to reflect society. I note your council mission has a commitment to respect and respecting the needs of future generations. As leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality, this motion will assist in respecting the needs of future generations. As I'm sure you appreciate, talent is equally divided between the genders, and in Australia more women graduate from universities than men. The value of women's input is not only widely recognised but backed by research. A recent McKinsey report concluded the companies where women are strongly represented at board or top management level are also the companies that perform best on both organisational and financial performance. The Ryby Institute reported that companies with women on the board outperform those without by 8.7%, and businesses with at least 30% women in leadership positions are 15% more profitable. Targets are needed to encourage change and show commitment. Currently, private sector companies with more than 500 employees must have policies or strategies covering 6 gender equality indicators, and these have to be reported to the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. The federal government has committed to the report to the Workplace Gender Equality Agency from 2022 to 23. Further to that, on December 2021, National Cabinet announced in principle agreement that all jurisdictions, including states and territories, will provide public sector workforce data to the WGEA as soon as possible. In 2020, the Victorian State Government passed the Gender Equality Act, which requires all Victorian councils to promote gender equality, conduct gender impact assessments, undertake a workplace gender audit and create a gender equality action plan. It seems a matter of time before councils in New South Wales will have to provide similar information. This motion provides Ku-ring-gai Council with the opportunity to show leadership in the New South Wales local government sector and the Council's commitment to join the broader community of organisations which are adopting gender equality strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question through you to Director Marshall. Director Marshall, does the Council have policies and framework around equal employment opportunity, equity and diversity? And briefly, what are the Council's commitment in this regard? And do we send our women staff to women's leadership courses? And how many do you think we may have done so this year?
Thank you, Councillor Ward. That's quite a fulsome question there, so I might allow Director Marshall to answer as much as he can.
Sorry, Councillor Ward. Okay.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council is committed to equal employment opportunity, and I might comment that that is about treating everybody equally, as opposed to this motion, which is actually encouraging targeted programs for women, so it's slightly different. We have equal employment opportunity management plans in place. We have a range of programs that support women in the workplace, from flexible working arrangements, paid parental leave, flexibility, carers leave. We also do professional development initiatives. Again, though, most of them are not specific to women, but they do support women as well as men. That includes leadership development programs, professional development, performance management, etc. there has been some targeted leadership programs for women, and recently there were 7 of our women leaders who attended a public sector leadership conference. As far as I can recall, that's the only targeted program that we've done in recent times, just specifically for women.
Thank you, Director. A fulsome answer for a lot of questions. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Marshall, so as part of your planning for employment opportunities, do you also have succession planning? Because we are talking about increasing our quota, and what do you identify as part of your succession planning for women?
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the workforce management strategy, there's a number of initiatives that will be of benefit to women's leadership, including succession planning. These are yet to be implemented though, so they're future programs. Job rotation programs in targeted positions, looking at viability of internal transfers and promotions, and development of a mentoring program.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Ward. You're reading your papers there again. Councillor Nye, I'm looking across at you. It's a little bit hard to see you on the screen.
I don't think I've put my hand up. I can speak if you want, but I don't think I've put my hand up.
Councillor Nye, I think we've just had a quick vote here and the nays have it, so unless you've got something to say. That's good. Councillors, any further debate on this particular motion? There being none, we'll move that motion as is on the screen. All those in favour, unless you would like to sum up, Councillor Taylor?
Thank you, no.
That's all right. All those in favour? That is... Hang on a minute. We've got hands going left, right and centre. So all those in favour of Councillor Taylor's motion is Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Wheatley, Councillor Smith, is yours up? Councillor Ward, Councillor Lennon, yours is not. Councillor Greg Taylor, it was a little bit. Councillor Nye, Councillor Pettit, those against? Councillor Spencer, Councillor Lennon, that motion is carried. Councillors, we move to NM4, that Councillor Spencer. Councillors, we then move to NM6, which is the proposed park bench installation and rescission motion. He's not moving it. So we go on to NM6. And that's a rescission motion lodged by Councillors Smith, Wheatley and Pettit. Councillor Smith.
Mr Mayor, I would like to move a notice of rescission in regarding NM6 on the proposed park bench in light of further information that has come forward.
Thank you. And a second, Councillor Wheatley. Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Firstly, I would like the opportunity and the support to bring this back to council and this rescission to be supported for a number of reasons. Some of the facts are that the public outcry for common sense has been enormous in St Ives, and enormous in Ku-ring-gai, and unfortunately much wider than what we anticipated. The other, which I will elaborate a little bit further facts that have come forward to me is that we've got 1,392 public benches in Ku-ring-gai, and at no point has anybody been injured by a motor vehicle crashing into a park bench, or somebody being injured on that park bench, if you like. The media attention has been huge on this item, and it's really just an outcry for this council to have some common sense. That's from North Shore Times, The Telegraph and the ABC radio. And lastly, even Councillor Kay, when she was leaving the
Can we
council
have a bit
chambers...
of silence in the gallery, please?
Even with Councillor Kay, who I overheard say that there will be a rescission on this matter, no doubt because it was due to common sense. So for these reasons, I hope that this will be supported.
That's a lie. Object. Sorry, withdraw. That is incorrect. I did not say that. Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Councillor Smith, have you finished? Or would you just...
Well, I must have misheard Councillor Kay.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Smith.
So I look for... Oh, you seconded it?
Councillor Wheatley has seconded it. Councillor Wheatley.
You can reserve your right. You can talk to people.
Councillor Wheatley...
At the moment, I'm going to reserve my right.
Seems to be a lot of that again. Anyway, Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So last month, staff provided us with the results of some community engagement. The survey that they sent out had 5 responses. 3 were in favour and supporting the installation of the bench, and 2 were in opposition. Since then, 2 of the supporters moved away, leaving a single solitary supporter of the bench. On that basis, it was a relatively simple decision. There was very limited support for the installation of the bench at that time. Since then, it's become a lot more complicated. So we have received 10 or maybe 12 emails from households supporting the installation of the bench. We've also received a petition of sorts of people who are in opposition to the bench. As Councillor Smith said, there has been a number of articles in the paper and online, and in fact there was also a poll on the Daily Telegraph site, and in that poll the majority of respondents found that we should not install this bench at this site. I think safety is a key concern, but since last month I believe Director Banasif has performed a full risk assessment of the site and determined that it's low risk. And I can say, having been there and sat on that corner and spoken to both locals objecting and supporting, that it is also my layman's assessment of the risk at that site as well. I think we can probably conclude that the community, the local community, the immediate vicinity, are more in favour of installing this bench than not. But I think we should acknowledge that if we do install it, it will almost certainly have a negative impact on the 2 households that are objecting. And in fact, I believe that the proponent of the bench has admitted that as well. It does have high potential to impact them. Therefore, I actually would like to propose an amendment, which I think was actually Councillor Smith's original motion from last week.
Do council staff have that?
Which the council staff have. I think it's appropriate for us...
One moment.
I beg your pardon?
We're only debating the rescission at this particular point in time.
I beg your pardon.
So that's quite all right.
I beg your pardon. Got confused about that.
You were quite keen there. That's all right.
I'm in favour of the rescission.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. You were on a roll, so you know. Councillor Lenner, in regards to the rescission itself, if you wish to add value to why we should rescind it or not.
Well, I was going to echo what Councillor Taylor said on the evidence before us last month, such as it was. We made the right decision. We have received, in my receipt, 14 local residents supporting, plus indications of a few more, indications of 10 opposing. So there's plenty in support, there's plenty in opposition. And as a council, we act for all of them. We represent people with whom we agree and people with whom we disagree. We represent all the neighbours. And in dealing with this difficult situation, we need to make a judgment call on behalf of all of them. And I thus concur that given the information we now have as against a month ago, I support the rescission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lennon. Don't see any more lights on, and Councillor Nye's hand is not up on the screen. So I'll put the rescission motion. All those in favour? That is Councillors Alec Taylor, Wheatley, Smith, Ward, Lennon, Pettit. Those against? Councillors Spencer, Kay, Greg Taylor and Councillor Nye. The rescission is carried. Councillor Smith, you can now move your motion.
Mr Mayor, off the back of that, I would like to move the officer's recommendation that was brought to this council in the first place. If we could just bring that up.
So which is that council approves the installation of the bench on the road reserve adjoining 1 Mariana Close, St Ives.
That is correct. Seconder.
And seconder for that is Councillor Wheatley. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. And I do want to thank you, the councillors coming forward this evening and basically showing support for this. I think it's something that, to be quite honest, it has got so much media attention, that much social media attention, and even to the Telegraph, that, you know, it started to bring this council into a position where we're being questioned on how much interference we can, as councillors, interfere with day-to-day small issues for sites. And I think another thing that's very important with this, and I hope that we've learned in this council, is that quite often you will get a very small minority that speak very loudly. And as councillors, we need to look at all the facts, that are actually put forward, and make a reasonable decision, not by the people that are screaming the loudest. And I think for those reasons there, it would appear this evening that I should be able to gain that support, and I really do look forward to getting everybody's support on this evening, because I think it is a great thing for the community, and it'd be nice not to be getting calls from the Telegraph and ABC Radio and North Shore Times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Wheatley is seconder. I think you'll be reserving your right.
I'm just going to echo Councillor Smith's comments.
Outstanding. Thank you, Councillor Wheatley. Councillor Nye, on screen.
Thank you. I've got a question, but first to the Director of Operations, but to establish the context. When I initially saw this GB item, I thought similar to the asbestos issue. I thought, isn't this a matter for council staff to decide as an operational issue? The paper clearly says, though, that because it's not a bus stop, park or town centre, we've taken this approach. My question is, are we going to come up with a policy of some sort or update some other policy so that it can cover benches in other locations in the future? Because otherwise I see this bench gate kind of thing happening over and over and over again. In fact, even on Facebook a few days ago, there was
Councillor
mention
Nye, I
about
think we've got the question.
bench. Yeah, so are we going to update a policy to cover benches in residential areas? And should we?
Director Watson, I think you got the call.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Nye, there are some Australian guidelines in relation to the distribution of benches of this type. You would find them very much more widely distributed than they are currently. So it may well be an issue you don't want to codify.
I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nye. Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you, Mr.
I think
Mayor.
you're keen, yes.
So I would like to move an amendment.
Excellent.
And the staff have that. So simply, the amendment is to install the bench and monitor it for a period of 6 months.
I might ask Councillor Smith if you might want to... Actually, you can't. It's probably...
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to incorporate that. That was something that I'd moved in the last council meeting.
Councillor Smith is happy to incorporate that as the amendment. Councillor Wheatley, you're good with that?
Agreed.
Excellent. Councillor Kay.
I'd like to speak against. Okay, now I too, like the others, have had a series of emails. I've seen petitions. I have read the emails. I've done what I can, but I am still very concerned about the safety issues that surround this bench. The gathering of residents, those from nearby areas, which are not necessarily people on that street, children playing in the middle of the road, children under the age of 12 leaving bikes in the middle of the road, parents shouting car when a car is coming. Distracted parents, I'm concerned about the drinking of alcohol and racial slurs that have been reported to police previously, and basically strange men sitting on the bench at night. This behaviour concerns me. I'm aware of some of this activity, and playing on streets would happen in regular neighbourhoods, but I'm concerned that a permanent bench installed from council would have a reputational risk for us, and anything that happens will be connected to Ku-ring-gai Council. Comparing a placement of a bench on a main road is like apples and oranges. So I don't see the relevance, and I'm not convinced a true safety and risk assessment has been done, because there's actually no policy for benches, unfortunately. I hope moving forward, as Councillor and I, we can look at addressing those needs. I have checked with the opponents of the bench, and it appears that since the illegal bench has been removed, there has been the expected amount of play from residents' children, but no mass gatherings. The tyre marks on the nature strip where the car could have rolled onto children or adults, this is the location where the bench is to be placed. I also spoke to the police, and while there is no law permitting children to not play on the road, it is clearly not recommended. Parks are designed for our community, and if they're not being utilised, I'm concerned as to why not. What is council doing wrong? Is there something wrong with our parks? Are they not open? Are they not accessible? Do they not have playgrounds that are appealing to children? The houses supporting the bench seem to be happy to have a bench that is not in front of their house. I have seen no email suggesting for it to be placed elsewhere. I do know that they talked about mediation or talking about another placement of a bench. I'm all for supporting residents and harmony in our community. I just don't believe, with the current information that I have, this is necessarily the best location for the bench. A 6-month trial is what the residents have already had, and I can't really see it making a difference other than costing the council money for its removal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Spencer.
I just have a question. What happens after the 6 months trial period? Is there a sunset clause where the bench comes off or something like that?
Director Banasif, I would imagine you would be reporting back to council?
That is correct, Mr Mayor.
So after that 6 months trial, then we would expect the director to take another perhaps 1 month to report back. Is that correct? I'm just looking at the duration.
You're looking for the time frame. Director?
Through Mr Mayor, Councillor Spencer is correct. If it's a 6-month trial, the bench, it'll be 6 months as of the installation, and then as Councillor Spencer alluded to, I would require a few weeks to prepare a report, and then 2 weeks in the public domain, and then report it to council. So in essence, you will receive a report 7 months after the installation.
Sorry,
Councillor Spencer?
It's not very important, but then the trial period says 6 months. Shouldn't that be extended to allow time for the report to come back? Because if it's 6 months, then we would expect the report to come back on the 5th month. Does that make sense?
I think I know where you're heading with that, but I'll let Director Banasif answer that one because it's his night tonight.
Through Mr. Mayor, maybe the wording around a trial period, a report be brought back to council in 6 months.
Councillor Smith, it's actually yours, so you're happy to incorporate that minor change that the Director has alluded to? You might want to just repeat that for staff's purposes, Director.
So just change in point A for a trial period with a report back to council within 6 months.
Everybody's happy with that, Councillor Spencer. Thank you very much. Councillor Nye.
Thank you. I've got a question to, I don't know which councillor, potentially Councillor Smith. During the public forum, we had one of the impacted neighbours say that the bench was interfering with her HSC year. Do we know whether that was this year or last year? And if it's this year, would you be open to commencing the trial after the HSC so that, as to minimise the impact on her studies?
Councillor Smith. Might be a
Thank you,
challenge
Councillor
this one.
Nye. My understanding it was last year. It's actually been the HSC trials and everything are over. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you.
Councillors, no further debate on this matter. Councillor Smith, would you like to sum up?
Yes. Firstly, again, thank you to the councillors in showing support for this bench. I just want to sort of alleviate just a little bit in regarding the tie marks. Those tie marks that were up on the curb side, if you like, onto the grass, that wasn't a car from skidding. I've actually asked a police officer to have a look at that for me, and my question was, does it appear that a car was out of control? And he said, no, it looks like a car put his car up there out of the way. So it was probably lack of parking in the street. So I thought, Councillor Kay, I'd just like to alleviate your concerns on that matter. As far as it goes as mediation, I think that as councillors, I think you've taken the role of councillor incorrect. We don't mediate with neighbours. I've got no intention. I'm quite happy to make a decision on things on the facts that are put in front of us, and I believe that is a role of the councillors to do. This is a great thing for the community. I'm expecting that we won't be hearing much more of this from the media, and I look forward to sitting on this bench. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. All those in favour of the motion up on the screen, that is Councillor Alec Taylor, Wheatley, Smith, Ward, Lennon, Pettit. Those against? Councillors Spencer, Kay, Greg Taylor and Nye. The motion is carried. We now move to NM7, which is an external review, and that was Councillor Nye's notice of motion. Councillor Nye.
I would like to move the motion as printed.
Is there a seconded, Councillor Alec Taylor? Councillor Nye.
Okay, thank you. So where does this come from? Well, if you remember the last two council meetings, they've both dragged on for quite a long period of time. In both council meetings, we were unable to decide how to come up with the money to deliver our project pipeline, and we were also unable to quite decide on how we're going to come up with the money to look after basic services such as footpaths and stormwater. And my own personal frustration has been that I know we've had discussions on all sorts of options. We've had 2 or 3 briefings at least where we talk about we could do this, we could do that. There's all sorts of ideas that we've raised, fantastic ideas to move forward. And I really genuinely appreciate some of the suggestions that staff have proposed, because they're potential ideas that we can explore. However, my frustration is that very few ideas have actually come into fruition. And I'm also looking at the timer and it's not moving, so you may want to move the timer. Now, we come to a situation now where our council's just really focused on this sort of one-trick pony. We're just saying asset sales will save us from everything. But the problem with asset sales, especially if it's two bowling sites, is that it does impact future generations, while, especially if we're proposing it at R2, it gives us a very low yield or return to the ratepayer, when we do know that it's quite likely that these will become R3. And the problem with asset sales is that it's not a sustainable thing. Like, yes, we could sell a few assets, I don't know which ones, but let's say we did sell a few assets this decade, it'll meet the needs of this decade, but there is still a structural underlying problem where next decade, we've run out of things to sell, we have to sell something else. So we really need to look at the way we spend our money, or the way we raise our money. And I'm actually disappointed that we didn't actually get to talk about Councillor Spencer's NM4, because that was one creative idea of addressing the issue. Now, I reached out to Local Government New South Wales. I asked them, look, is there a short list of external consultants that could help us with this kind of thing, just to expedite the process? And they said no, a short list does not exist. They did recommend us to consider perhaps some of the big four accounting firms. They also suggested maybe there are ex-general managers out there who might be able to act as consultants. And that takes us to where this notice of motion is today. I want to draw attention to 6 key features. The first feature is that right now, it does not commit our council to spend a significant amount of money. All we are doing is calling for an expression of interest to see what kind of shortlist or what kind of talent pool exists out there. Secondly, I do believe that if we do engage a consultant, the benefits will outweigh the costs. So let's say, for example, we spent $60,000. I'm sure that the consultant will be able to identify more than $60,000 of savings across a period of time. And we're talking about savings that we otherwise would not have been able to identify with our existing staff, even though they are already doing a good job. Alternately, if they're unable to identify the savings, then perhaps it suggests that council staff are doing a good job. Thirdly, I believe that through this EOI process, it allows all the talent or the consultants out there to put their best foot forward, so that we know what skills are available should we choose to engage them this year or sometime in the future. Fourthly, I think this EOI process gives us the flexibility, so that if we identify 2 consultants, for example, one that's good at a certain scope such as process improvements and lifting customer satisfaction, and another who has a specialisation in, say, revenue opportunities, we could change the scope and engage 2 or 3 consultants with a much lower cost if we choose to pick and choose what we need. Fifth, I do believe that if we do this, it gives the council staff an opportunity to have a say as well. They get to see who has participated in the EOI. They get to, as council staff, get to recommend to us who they believe would be capable of doing a good job, or they might even explain to us why we shouldn't hire anyone, and that's completely fine. But it does give our council staff a say in the process. And sixth, I believe that what we have right now is a realistic timeline. So just to sum up, I know that some people balk at the concept of hiring consultants, but I do believe that benefits outweigh the costs. I do believe also that we're taking a responsible approach if we go forward with this, and we're just asking for expressions of interest. We're not locking in our spend. We're going to decide the scope and who, and context and all of that later. So I would encourage all councillors to support this motion. And I really look forward to seeing if this goes through, what the EOI comes out with, and discussing the options in a few months' time. Thank you.
Second, Councillor Taylor.
I reserve my right at this time. Thank you.
Councillors, this is an interesting concept. when I read point A, expression of interest seeking the input of consultants on matters such as cost management, service delivery, funding options, project pipeline. We seem to be covering everything, literally everything. Service delivery. We can decide what we wish to provide to our residents already. Be careful what you wish for with this particular motion. What happens if we engage a consultant and he comes back and says, the Ku-ring-gai Arts Centre, that's costing a hell of a lot of money and servicing very few people. Get rid of it. What happens if the consultant comes back and says, you have 4 libraries, for example. You don't need 4. You need to close 2 of them to save some money. That could mean closure of the Linfield Library or Turramurra Library. There's 2 out of the 4. What happens when they look at the project pipeline? They might suggest Marin Street Theatre. It's too costly. Don't do it. Again, be careful what you wish for with this concept. Funding options. We have a funding program for our infrastructure backlog and projects. However, this evening, we just stopped 10 million plus coming from the Gordon Bowling Club sale. And what have we done? We've added to our backlog by an estimated $10 million. That's a $20 million decision that you guys have just made. That's a big decision. Councillors, you were elected to make decisions. We're also talking about talent retention / development. We're now going into operational matters. That seems a bit weird to me. Director Marshall, how much, in theory, might this concept that Councillor Nye is putting forward cost? It just roughly, if we're engaging, say, one of the big 4, and what time frame might it take to come back with some reports and recommendations?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is difficult to speculate as to how much it would cost. The potential scope is quite broad, as you have alluded to. So it's really quite open-ended. But anecdotally, organisations like Big Fours charge a lot of money, so it could well be hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the scope, yes.
Would you say that we wouldn't get much change out of $500,000, depending on the scope and size and length of this particular project?
That's possible, Mr. Mayor, yes.
That's an exorbitant amount of money that we have to find. Now, if we're looking to reduce our infrastructure backlog, we have a couple of options. Increase rates, sell assets, take out loans. Is there a 4th one? We're not a benevolent society. People can't just donate money to us. They don't get a tax deduction for it. Just think about it. What happens if it does come back and you've engaged a consultant and says, sorry, Marin Street Theatre, way too expensive. Then you've got to make a decision, oh, I don't like that recommendation from an expert consultant. If you don't like the answers, don't ask the questions. Pretty simple. So I cannot support this particular motion. I think it sends the wrong message to the general public. It sends the wrong message to the Office of Local Government. It shows to them and the wider community that councillors think there is some major issues with council, that they have to look at engaging external consultants to analyse every nook and cranny within council. And this is not just a 6-week project, this is months or years. And then those recommendations will have to come back. And guess what? We will probably be post next election by the time any of those recommendations might be implemented. And I'll leave it at that. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Director Marshall. Just in relation to, if we to have somebody to come through here, we're looking for an $80 to $100 million backlog of money that we've got to find. So I'm sure that there's only one way that these consultants could recommend it. It would be through asset sales. So I suppose the next question is, I know the answer we're going to ask you, but are they able to come in and they can recommend asset sales, but it's up to the council at the end of the day. Sorry, I'm going to take that back. It's at the end of the day, it's up to councillors here to make the decision on what assets we're prepared to sell on behalf of the community, not some third party to come in and recommend us on what we've done. I suggest if you do feel that that is required, you've probably been elected on the wrong platform in the wrong position, because currently at the moment, the awards that this council has won over the period of time is quite, what's the word? Pleasing?
And numerous.
No, in all honesty, it is something that we should be very proud of, and that this council has managed to stay in a very fiscal position the whole time. I think that Councillor Nye, where he might be going with this, is he's thinking that this may be able to be changed in some form of an org chart, changing it. Now, with an org chart, we're not going to find $80 to $100 million in that. That's for certain. And that leads to the question, Director Marshall, apologies to be keeping you on the line for so long. What's our rate per capita per head spend on per person in Ku-ring-gai versus what is spent in other council areas with a similar sized council? So overall, what I'm asking for is what are our costs, if you like, our organisational costs, in comparison to other councils that are serving this size community? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our operating expenditure per capita is, when compared to urban Sydney councils, we are the 6th lowest cost per capita out of those 23 councils. We also have the 9th lowest total rates per capita, and we've also the 2nd lowest increase in operating expenses over the last 5 years out of the metro councils.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Smith.
Whilst I've got you there, just in relation to, I know that you want to be careful on what the speculation is when we're talking about Councillor Nye's interpretation of the Big Four, but I've got a bit of an understanding what the Big Four cost, and they definitely go into more than Big Fours. I'm through my discussions on what would be something that would be, let's say, that was to go through this council, if you like. We're talking about $400,000 to $500,000 thereabouts, is what the mayor alluded to. Have we even got that in the budget, or where's that, or where are we proposing that would come out of to spend that type of money for these consultants?
Director.
Mr. Mayor, that would have to be a future consideration of council, either from reserves or reducing other projects to fund it.
Okay, all right. So we can see that it's actually going to put a lot of a lot more difficulties in front of this council, and maybe we may need to start selling some assets just to pay for this report. But in any case, I'll wait to hear further debate.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Greg Taylor.
Just a question for Councillor Nye here. As far as I understand it, this is not this notice of motion is not dealing with paying anything, and we're just voting or debating whether we would like a process put in play where we ask for an expression of interest. Can I just confirm that that's the case, please?
Yes, Councillor Greg Taylor. This does not commit us to spending anything. This only gets us to go out there and see what talent is available and what they're willing to charge. And I believe that if we look at former general managers who act as consultants, they're not going to spend $400,000 or $500,000. They may well be under $100,000 and provide very good value.
Thank you, Councillor Nye.
I might just jump in before the next. Director Marshall, Councillor Nye alluded it wouldn't actually, or through that question, that it wouldn't cost anything. Surely if you're going out and asking for expressions of interest, then assessing them, that would cost something, wouldn't it? Would there be advertising, staff hours, etc., etc.?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there would be time and effort into preparing the brief, seeking the EOI, and then assessing the EOI. I think Councillor Nye expects that staff would have some input into assessing it and making recommendations. And so yes, it would be a substantial body of work that would be undertaken in order to report this back to Council.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Lennon.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, my feeling is that we should not start a process if we're not willing to finish it. So even if the costs initially are fairly low, I just don't think we should begin something unless we're willing to go the whole hog. And my feeling from my experience of these things is that it's actually very easy for consultants to come up with cost savings. It's very easy to say shed staff, and then you end up spending a lot more on consultants. It's very easy to say sell assets, because if you come in and you're not interested in art centres or you're not interested in libraries, to me, all these pursuits are wonderful ideas, and I commend Councillor Nye for talking to them. But I feel they can all be best handled internally by the staff and the councillors that we have, according to our values, according to what we think is important, and our willingness to subsidise things like libraries and art centres because we think they're important. Our reasons to say, well, we don't actually want a consultant to tell us where we should save money. We'll decide that for ourselves. So I respect the sentiment behind the motion, but I do oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lennon. Councillor Smith.
I'll be speaking against this motion. As well intended as Councillor Nye has put it, I think that it would only be destructive to this council. I think it is sending a message out to our staff, the many staff that we've got in Ku-ring-gai, that we're unhappy with what there is, and at the moment we haven't got anything to be unhappy with. We're in a very good position. So if there was an issue and we were having issues in day-to-day operational issues in trying to find costs and so forth, then maybe. But again, I think that it's got the potential of losing staff. We've seen big outfits, the likes of Telstra, all this type of thing. They bring in these firms, and generally what happens is you will get just a big turnover of staff because they don't want to be involved in the process. I think in today's reality, with finding employees that are doing a good job is very difficult. And I think this flies in the face of our staff that have been working hard and have worked through COVID, and that has assisted us in keeping this council in a good fiscal position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Ward. Councillor Kay, sorry.
Thank you. This is through you, Mr. Mayor, through you, General Manager, to the relevant Director, which is Director Marshall. Have we had anything similar in the past whereby external consultants have looked at improving cost efficiencies, like in the last 5 or so years?
Director Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have undertaken various reviews, but on a smaller scale. So, look, it's probably 5 or 6 years ago. We had some consultants look at a selection of services and provide recommendations for improvements. In more recent times, we have undertaken reviews of our information technology area and strategy. Our waste area has recently undertaken a review, and I understand that councillors will be briefed on that soon. We undertook an extensive review of the library services that led to some savings and a restructure in the last probably 2 or 3 years. We undertake internal audits, which, while they're not efficiency reviews, are process reviews and compliance reviews. We're currently working with Northern Beaches Council, who have taken it upon themselves to run a benchmarking exercise in partnership with a number of councils, and that includes customer service, domestic waste, bushland management, environmental health and food premises. So that's the type of reviews that we've undertaken on a smaller scale.
So just a follow-up question. So obviously they provided some recommendations. So just to confirm, did we act on these services, and do you believe, in your opinion, that they were successful? Were they, for example, cost savings to us out of those findings?
Director?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we did act on the recommendations. Some led to cost savings, some don't lead to cost savings, but they lead to better quality outcomes.
Thank you, that's all I need.
Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, my question is to Director Marshall. Director Marshall, are you aware of any other councils are doing such reviews through your peers, or the General Manager perhaps?
Director or General Manager might jump in.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the one that I can think of in more recent times is obviously Central Coast Council. They had a massive review. They're probably of a scale a little bit bigger than us. They're around, 3,500 employee mark, but that's the only one I can really think of in recent times.
Okay. I understand Ryde Council is undertaking one. Through you, Mr. Mayor, my question is to Councillor Nye. I'm really not sure what it is that we're trying to achieve here. I understand that we have got challenges in financing things, and on the one hand we say we are in a very good position, on the other hand we say we can't fund major projects because we don't have money. So I think it's a contradiction in terms, and I understand that. So will a review of sorts really bring out what? I'm not quite sure, but I do believe that there is a time now that we do need to have a look at what is happening with our operational finances, and why is it that we can't fund major projects. It goes on and on and on for years and years and years, and it really is, as our lovely mayor here has often said, we're a can-do council. So Councillor Nye, perhaps you may be able to clarify for me, please, what is it that we're trying to achieve here, and what outcome are we looking for without having to put the council staff, the council, through, whatever challenges this will bring to us?
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. I could talk on and on, but I'll try to keep it short. What this is not about is org structures. And for those who are good at reading English and comprehension, anyone who reads the second last paragraph of the preamble should be clear that this is not about staff jobs. This is about finding better ways of doing things, but not about staff jobs. And what we hope to achieve here is we want to get a better picture of which consultancies are out there, what talent, what skills are out there to potentially provide us with an additional opinion on how things can be done better here at Ku-ring-gai Council. We have fully acknowledged in that second last paragraph of the preamble that things are being done well already, but there is a sense of frustration that despite all the suggestions that have been raised, we're not acting on any of them, apart from trying to sell 2 assets. What this motion proposes is that we get a better sense of who is out there so that we can make a subsequent decision in October or November as to whether or not we would engage some of these consultants potentially at a potential cost that we believe will deliver value. We're not going to spend $500,000, but if we do believe, for example, if we engage one consultant, a former general manager, $80,000 for 1 or 2 months, and they're able to deliver savings that aren't necessarily asset sales, but other forms of savings that no one else has seen, then that is definitely good value, a good return for the ratepayer. We want to have an open mind to things, and we want to be smart about the way we spend money in order to get that full list of potential ideas. And we as a council have done this in the past before in other areas, and we should be open to doing that here as well.
Councillor Ward, you still have the call. Did you want to ask any further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick follow-up question.
Would you like a quick answer as well?
With Councillor Nye, thank you for that. So are you suggesting that we cannot do a review ourselves? Yeah, I understand that we have identified a number of things and it doesn't go anywhere. Are there mechanisms within the council, through the mayor, through the general manager, that perhaps we can work this through? Do you think that is not a possibility?
I think there should be a 2-pronged approach. One, yes, we have identified a number of opportunities, but we're dragging for some reason, and it's really stalled our last 2 council meetings. They're longer than they needed to be. So we need to get acting on what these potential options are, put it out in public, debate it, get sorted before the next election comes. Secondly, I do believe that there is potential value if we pick the right consultants, that they can deliver more value for the ratepayer than the cost of hiring them. So, 2-pronged approach.
One more, Councillor Ward.
Just a quick one. That's great, but here's the thing: the report will come to the council. What makes you think the council will adopt the changes that they recommend?
It is like any other audit or expert recommendation. So what typically happens in an audit is that the auditors make various recommendations. The staff will then make, they will say, we support this and this action, but we disagree with this and this. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to the staff and up to the councillors working together to decide which recommendations that they choose to action. It's not a rubber stamp. It's not just because the consultant has recommended we do something, we therefore must do it. It's just providing options for us to consider.
Councillor Alec Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to briefly speak in favour of this motion. I think that we have had some roadblocks and that it would be helpful to have an outside perspective on addressing those roadblocks. I would like to say that I agree with Councillor Smith and the Director of Corporate that there does not appear to be any evidence of a whole lot of fat in this council. It doesn't seem to me like we have an expenses problem, although there may be some opportunity in that space. I don't think that's the primary objective of this motion. I think it's a holistic review, and I think it's just the first step, and we could very easily choose not to go further with it, but I'm also confident that we could get help to overcome some of those roadblocks that we've experienced in the last couple of months.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Before I go to you, Councillor Smith, Councillor Nye, just a quick question. You did mention that you do feel frustrated that we did have various opportunities there to progress things. I'll remind you of the fact that you've actually voted against almost $30 million worth of asset sales, being 2 bowling club sites, cooler, and also the secret garden. So if we want to progress things, we've actually got to vote for things. So that's $30 million that you've been voting against. I'm not quite sure. You're saying one thing but doing another. Is that correct?
I don't think that's a complete statement. I've also demonstrated that I am willing to sell certain things. I've even suggested that perhaps we should do a partial sale of bowling clubs. There's also a number of items on just the asset sale side of things, which we have discussed confidentially, which I would gladly support. But we just haven't to date raised them publicly. So I'm not allowed to talk about them. So there are options out there. We haven't explored them. There are things that I'm definitely willing to support. And also, we're so focused on asset sales. There are other ways of generating revenue, whether it be increasing revenue somehow, or whether it be to change the way we spend our money. We need to have a holistic view.
Thank you, Councillor Nye. Through to you, Director Marshall. In Councillor Nye's motion, it does mention service delivery. We currently have 2 public golf courses. Is there a potential that there is a recommendation to sell one of those golf courses, which might be the Gordon Golf Course? Is that a possibility? Director?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that would be a possibility, yeah. It's golf courses, while golf has certainly improved in COVID, it's taken off a bit. Nevertheless, there's always a subsidy to those courses, and we do own 2 of them in an area that has multiple private golf courses.
I'll probably supplement that, Mr. Mayor. I guess it depends on what you ask the consultants. If you ask consultants to pare back service delivery to what is only essential service delivery for local government, well, then you could make an argument local government shouldn't be in childcare, there's private providers. It shouldn't be in golf courses, there's private providers. There's a whole range of services that private providers, I guess, provide and coexist with local government. So if you're going to ask them to pare back to what is our core business and essential services, you could get a range of ideas that they come up with and say, well, at the end of the day, council, you know what? That's not core business. You can do without it. Whether council takes that on board, or you may not want to go there and ask them about that. It depends really on the brief that you give the consultants as to what they examine.
Thank you, General Manager. Councillor Taylor. That's all right. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may ask a question through you to Councillor Nye. Councillor Nye, if we were to proceed with your nom that you've put here this evening, do you envisage that they're going to come back with some big changes and what needs to be done and how it needs to be done?
Councillor Nye?
I believe it depends on who we select. I believe that if you choose a very expensive Big Four, they will come up with all sorts of easy, quick wins that are big, but which we won't like. But I believe that if we pick someone who's, say, a former general manager with a lot of experience in things, and they see certain additional insights, they may actually be changes that we are willing to adopt. At the same time, I also believe that if we take on a former general manager, they may actually also comment that the council's also quite well run, and while say 80-90% of it's good, they're just suggesting a few small tweaks here and there, which, by the way, still bring more benefit than the cost of hiring them for the period.
Thank you. So you also believe that you anticipate that a likely outcome of the consultant's review is confirmation that the organisation is generally well run?
That is a real possibility, yes. But I still do believe that the benefits brought will exceed
that's all I needed, Councillor Nye.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Alec Taylor.
I just wanted to assess whether or not we've had 2 for and against.
There's been 2 for and 3.
2 for and 3 against. So you have.
Let the motion be put to a vote.
All those in favour of putting the motion? That is unanimous. As mover of the motion. Councillor Nye, do you wish to sum up?
Oh, yes, please. So just to clarify a few points of misunderstanding, this is in no way about our staff. If you look at the second last paragraph of the preamble, it's clearly not about staff. The scope of the activity really depends on how we define it, and we are not defining the scope at this point in time. We are purely seeking an expression of interest to see what capabilities are out there. Based on those capabilities, we may decide to define a scope in October or November, or we may decide not to do a scope at all because we don't have confidence in the consultants that put their hand up. But if we define the right scope, if we choose the right consultants, it's not going to be a $500,000 project. It would likely be under $100,000. I do believe that the additional savings that we identify will outweigh the cost of hiring the consultant. I do believe that our role as councillors isn't to just rubber stamp any expert recommendation or any staff proposal that comes before us. Ultimately, this consultant will suggest all sorts of changes, perhaps 20. And after staff have reviewed and after councillors have reviewed, it's well possible that we only pick 4 or 5 that we actually want to go through with. But delivering on those 4 or 5 things out of a list of 20 will still give us benefits that exceed the cost of running the EOI process and hiring the consultant. I do believe publicly that this also shows that we are doing everything we can to make the most of the limited funds that are available to us. And yeah, I do personally hope that we continue to progress with everything else. We've discussed all sorts of things in multiple workshops, but why haven't we taken action on those other things? Why have we just focused on 2 asset sales? I'm very keen to support some of the other asset sales that have been proposed. I can't publicly talk about what they are, but I do believe that it's more than just asset sales that we should be thinking about. We should be thinking about how do we spend money, how do we satisfy our ratepayers, and whether or not there's any other forms of appropriate revenue. So I would encourage all councillors to support this particular motion. We're not committing to doing anything drastic at this point in time. We are purely seeing what capability is out there, who is available at what cost, and whether or not it makes sense to engage in 1 or 2 consultants to perform very limited scopes of work that provide benefit that exceed the cost. Thank you.
So the motion, all those in favour? Councillor Spencer, Councillor Kay, Councillor Alec Taylor, Councillor Greg Taylor, Councillor Nye. Against? Councillors Wheatley, Smith, Ward, Lennon and Pettit. That is 5-5. I use my casting vote against the motion. The motion is lost. That's all right. That's it. Business without notice. Councillors' business without notice, subject to clause 9.3 of the Code of Meeting Practice. There is none. Questions with notice. There was a QN1, which I believe...
Got a comment on that or a question?
You can't comment on it, unfortunately.
There's just some paper there.
Yeah, just the layout of the responses, if they could correlate, because there's like 1A and it doesn't correlate. So
I'm sure Director
Director
Banasif
Banasif
will deal with any typographical
making it a little bit more streamlined.
If you could send those through to him after the council meeting,
That's
that'd be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Inspections, there are none. Therefore, declare the meeting closed at 10:40. Thank you, one and all. Did all right.